BG podcast number 47. We're live, guys. Many thanks to everyone who's joined already. You can see there's a few people in the chat. I hope everyone's doing well. Few technical issues last show, which meant the podcast number 46 was uploaded in two parts. Hoping that we will not be experiencing the same technical difficulties tonight. Don't believe that's going to be the case. So looking forward to a good show, and certainly a hell of a lot to discuss tonight. We're going to start by discussing last week's boxing, Huck v Brieids. Maybe we'll touch on Akinladi v Gorman. We'll move on to some of the news in the sport. Ward versus Kovalev announced. The return of Mikhail Kessler, the Brook ticket sales, the Billy Joe Saunders situation. And then finally, we'll have a look ahead to next week's action. Terry Flanagan versus Petrov, Liam Williams, Liam Smith, Lomachenko, and lots of other stuff going on as well. Busy night tonight on the show. Jet and Irish Tom are joining us. They're both going to be running slightly late. Irish Tom is probably going to be on in 5-10 minutes or so. So delighted to be starting off with Paul. Paul, how you getting on?
Yep, all good, mate. How's yourself?
Yeah, good stuff, mate. Good stuff. Staying out of trouble. Paul, I guess the obvious starting point for this one is Huck versus Brieids, which was one of the things we discussed last week. Relatively easy work for Brieids in the end. What did you make of the fight, mate?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it was pretty much a shutout for my money. I had a feeling Brieids would win. I kind of thought he might knock him out, but Hook's obviously quite durable. He caught him late on. There was a nice uppercut and a nice right. I think he caught him with later on as well. It was hardly a vintage evening, Jet. It was hardly a vintage night of boxing, was it? Decent fight. I mean, it was a decent performance. I thought Brieids looked decent. He didn't sort of like wasn't spectacular. He's a guy that just does the basics very well. I thought his footwork was quite good. He was always sort of like either out of range or in close to tuck him up a little bit. Hook just looked. I don't know. I can't decide. I may need to watch it again. I can't decide whether it was Brieids' footwork that just sort of like pretty much neutralized Hook, or whether Hook just shot. Like we spoke about this last week, didn't we? I mean, like, you kind of think of Hook as an older fighter, don't you? You know, the idea that he is the same Brieids is quite mad, because I view Hook as very battle worn, he's been in a lot of wars, and I thought that kind of told a little bit at the weekend. He looked a bit trigger shy, like he just didn't seem to want to throw. You know, if you've watched a lot of Hook's fights, which I have watched quite a few of Hook's fights, you're kind of like, right, this is the point he's going to start throwing, right? He's bound to start throwing now, and it just never happened. It never really happened. He had a go once or twice, but I thought Brieids' jab was really good as well. I thought that was probably the difference. Brieids' footwork and his jab. His jab was snappy. It was a hard jab as well at points. Really nice. I saw nothing in either guy though that tells me that they'd give Usyk any trouble whatsoever. Though I've got to be honest, I think Usyk would handily outbox both guys. To be completely honest, he's fighting at the weekend as well on the I believe it's on the Lomachenko undercard. Yeah, I mean, it was a decent fight, but it was hardly. We're not going to be come November or December. We're not going to be talking about this one as a fight of the year contender. I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah, I found it hard to know what I thought of it, Paul. Part of me thinks Brieids went out and he completely took away the game of a top cruiserweight and won nearly every round. You know, he's a future star. Part of me is thinking that Marco Huck looked absolutely terrible. He's clearly a over-the-hill sort of fighter. And, you know, Brieids looked sort of solid, but a little bit unspectacular against Huck. And I kind of keep flitting between the two. Do you have an instinct as to where you sit, or is it somewhere in the middle?
Well, I mean, I think it's probably somewhere in the middle. I think it's probably a little bit of both. I think Brieids is decent. He's got decent power. As I say, he's got decent footwork, decent jab, but he's not spectacular. I think Hook, I think the Hook of a couple of years ago would have given Brieids a harder time. Now, is that because he's totally shot? Is it because Brieids sort of took away his weapons? I mean, really, let's be honest. If we're talking punches, Hook's really only got that big right over the top, hasn't he? He hasn't really got much else. And Brieids did do a good job of taking that away with his footwork. He was always sort of often just out of range, usually to the left, and that's the obvious way to take away someone's big right. But I mean, yeah, a bit sort of halfway in between, mate. I think it was probably a bit of both. I definitely think we've seen the best of Hook.
Stuff. And after the fight, Paul, how do you kind of rate the cruiserweight division? I mean, I'm presuming from your comment earlier, you know, you've got Usyk as number one. Is that the case? And how do you sort of rate the guys in behind him at this stage?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, some of the guys that I would have been looking at, Grigori Drozd, Lebedev, Glowacki, maybe even, you know, have kind of like they're either not, they're a bit inactive. Like, I don't know when was the last time Drozd or Lebedev fought. Lebedev last year, I think, but I don't know when the last time Drozd fought was.
Yeah, Drozd has been out of action for, well, it must be nearly 2 years now, mustn't it? He was prior to Tony Bellew winning that belt, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of have to sort of like leave them out of the equation, really, for me. I think it's probably, I mean, for me, there's no doubt in my mind Usyk's the best cruiserweight in the world. There's just no doubt in my mind. It's just he's got too many tools for the rest of the guys in my view. The way he just outboxed Glowacki just kind of like confirmed that for me. I kind of thought it already, but that kind of confirmed it for me. I think I like Gassiev. I like his style. I like the way he fights. And I like Brieids. I think they're probably I mean, it's probably Hook. God, not Hook. It's probably Usyk, Brieids, Glowacki, and then Gassiev.
Yeah, I think that's a fair shout. And, you know, there's a lot of rumours that, you know, this Super Series boxing tournament will take place in the cruiserweight division. And, you know, if you got all of those guys in the tournament, I, like you, would expect Usyk to come out as the number one, but there could be some, you know, some great fights along the way, certainly. Yeah. Paul, one other question, and then we'll bring Jet in. Box Nation coverage. So the reason I bring this up specifically, it's not specific to last week, but it is, you know, it is a recurring theme, and it is something that I thought was relevant last week. And I know Ultratech Sports has mentioned it several times recently on his channel, and I'm inclined to agree with him. The Box Nation coverage seems to be, you know, a little bit dire at present. And what I mean by that is the commentary seems to be slipping. The presentation and production is very poor. You know, you've got Steve Bunch fronting the show, and, you know, it kind of looks like a bit of a bargain basement outfit in terms of the production. I thought Barry Jones had a bit of an off night on the Marco Huck Brieids fight, certainly from my perspective. And I just feel that in terms of not necessarily talking about the fights themselves, but in terms of the other stuff that's going on in the production, the Box Nation coverage is possibly even further behind Sky than it's been in the past at the present. Just wanted to know if you've got any thoughts on that, and if you agree or potentially disagree with the statement.
I mean, definitely, generally, I think Barry Jones is a bit hit and miss. Like, sometimes he says stuff that I really agree with. Sometimes he says stuff and I'm just like, what on earth are you watching? Like, did you watch something else for 5 minutes and forget that you'd watch something else? Because he seems to be, at times, what he says seems to have no connection to what's actually on the screen. This particular weekend, regarding the Hook Brieids fight, I didn't watch it on the Box Nation feed. I watched it on a Russian feed, so I couldn't understand the word that was being said anyway. But generally, yeah, I think it is a bit of a bargain basement job. Steve Bunce, I always just think of it's kind of like the daytime TV kind of like of boxing, isn't it? It's kind of like Steve Bunce is all good when he's talking to sort of like young up and coming fighters and whatnot, but as a presenter, it does. I mean, yeah, he's not the best, is he? And production generally, and I kind of just think this about the whole Box Nation, Queensbreed. Like, it's just they always seem sort of like a couple of levels below maybe a Sky production in just everything. I mean, I can remember watching a press conference where the sort of like, the big banners at the back that had fighters' faces on were kind of falling down, and it was all crooked, and it was just like kind of like, that just sort of like epitomizes what is going on with this outfit at the minute. It's just kind of like nothing's very good. And I said this when we were talking when the ITV4 deal got the deal that Frank just, is it ITV4?
Oh, BT Sports.
BT Sports, sorry. The BT Sports deal got announced. It was kind of like they're gonna need to bring in some new blood with regards their team and whatnot, for my money, because there's obviously people that are kind of like not really up to performing at a level that is necessary to be putting on these big kind of like shows, certainly not to compete with Sky. And I'm no fan of Eddie Hearn, but when you talk about the production levels, there is a big void, there is a gap between the two. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think the reason I bring it up, because Adam's put in the chat, Box Nation coverage has always been like that since it started, and I think that's right to an extent. But some of the commentary recently, I think, has been more debatable. And I think the reason I bring it up now is because whilst I appreciate Box Nation has always possibly been a bit of a more of a bargain basement operation, they're now trying to position themselves as major competitors to Sky with the new BT Sports deal. And, kind of with that in mind, you would kind of hope to see some improvement. And, let's hope that is the case.
Well, it will be the case when the BT Sports deal kicks in, I mean, why was Barry Jones particularly bad at the weekend, was he?
I thought he had a bit of a shocker, yeah. I thought his commentary was very poor. I'm unaware that he actually revealed his scorecard at one occasion during the fight. There were a lot of, for me, Huck had literally minimal success throughout the course of the fight. And, maybe it's because he thought the scorecards would be close, but he seemed to be giving Huck more credit than was due. And it's, Barry Jones has always been, I guess he was kind of a breath of fresh air when he initially started the commentary, but I think he's had a few rough nights. And all I was doing is I was looking at Steve Bunce hosting and presenting and just thinking that, just thinking that this wasn't going to be the face of BT Sports. But that BT Sports deal kicks in on Saturday, you know, so they've got to raise their game very quickly if they're looking to do that for the new launch, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I gave Hook, I think, 1 round, and even that was a close round. I thought I wouldn't have argued with anybody that just had it 12-0. To be completely honest, I think
I agree.
I wouldn't have any arguments with that. So yeah, I mean, if he was giving Hook, if he had it close, or if he sounded like he had it close, then yeah, that's a howler of epic proportions, because that was not a close fight.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm not saying he necessarily was saying Huck was going to win, but I just felt there were several rounds where he was sort of implying that Huck had done particularly well, where I thought that, you know, it's very one-sided. But anyway, we'll see. We'll see. I think some of the BT Sports viewers who are tuning into boxing for the first time are going to get a little bit of a shock if Steve Bunce is hosting with his gang of merry men on Saturday night. But, you know, maybe we'll come to that later again when we preview next week's bill.
Indeed.
Yeah. Cheers for that, Paul. Good insight, mate. Let's go over and bring in Jet. Jet, how you doing, mate?
Hello.
How's things?
Not so bad. Yourselves? Sorry, I'm late.
Yeah. Very, very good. Very good. Jet, obvious starting place, Huck versus Brieids. Did you watch the fight? And if so, how did you see it, mate?
No, I didn't watch the fight. I'm joking. Just for all the people that say, "Oh, you don't watch the fights." Nah, I watched it, and yeah, I mean, it wasn't a barn burner. Let's put it that way. It was a decent fight, but you know, obviously Brieids done really well. Huck at this stage in his career, I think he's way past it. I mean, it's tough to see where Huck goes from here. I know he had the sort of fringe IBO belt, was it? And he won against Afolabi or something in his fourth fight against Afolabi, but Afolabi was coming towards the end of his career as well. And as I understand that, Afolabi's actually since retired. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard to gauge where Brieids is. He's a good fighter. Obviously, he has a credible sort of win on his resume, but you know, it's tough to kind of put him in a position where you could say he's definite, maybe number 2 or something like that. I think Murat Gassiev is probably number 2. He has a big high-profile win over Denis Lebedev in what was supposed to be a unification, but Lebedev wouldn't put up his WBA belt. So yeah, I mean, Brieids done well. He used his jab very well. He did show different strings to his bow. You know, he was lighter on his feet than many people imagined. Certainly, I imagined. You know, he showed good footwork. You know, he done different things that you would expect. Probably what you would associate with Brieids before is kind of seek and destroy. You come in and use a jab to just get inside, but he done it very effectively, and he had a lot of subtle movement with his footwork, which kind of bothered a Huck a lot more than, you know, maybe catches the eye, I guess. You know, Brieids is definitely a top 5 operator at cruiserweight. You know, he's a serious operator, but would he beat someone like an Usyk? Probably not. I did see your post-fight breakdown, and I'd be inclined to agree that he would struggle against someone like Usyk. He would probably he's just a bit short. You know, he uses his frame very well. He uses his frame against Huck very well, but Usyk's a big guy for cruiserweight. He moves around the ring. He dances around the ring. And, you know, I don't think he wants to get in a jabbing contest with Usyk. I think he'd lose quite, you know, relatively comfortably in that fight. But, you know, a good win for him, as I said, and onwards and upwards for Marius Brieids. Yeah.
Good stuff, mate. Good stuff. How do you? You've kind of alluded to it in your answer there, but you know, you've got maybe Usyk number 1, Gassiev number 2. Do you think sort of Brieids, Glowacki, do you think they sort of make up the top of the cruiserweight division, given Bellew is now departed?
Yeah, definitely for me, the money man has gone from the division. I think Barry Jones, he did have a very poor night, let's put it that way. But there's one thing he definitely said that was correct, that Bellew is the money man at cruiserweight, and he's departed the division for at least the foreseeable future. So, you know, the guys that are fighting, they're kind of Eastern European guys, American guys. You know, they're not as well known to the casuals. So there's not much money in the fights. Not that it's a bad thing. At least we get to see, you know, big fights getting made. So yeah, Usyk number 1, Gassiev 2. You know, then you kind of have the rest: Brieids, Lebedev, Glowacki, DeCourtis, you know, those sort of guys. You know, they're in and around the top 10. Shumenov holds a belt. I know he's not a real world champion. He's got the regular WBA or something like that. So, you know, they're there or thereabouts. They have some decent operators. It's a very live division. As Paul mentioned, Grigory Zod, he's there, but he hasn't fought in a long time. Vlodarchik, he's there as well. There's some good names, but you know, for me, it's probably like something. Glowacki maybe 4 or something like that. Brieids 3, and you know, DeCourtis or someone like that, and number 5.
Good stuff, mate. I think you probably caught the tail end of what Paul and I were saying about the Box Nation presentation.
Yeah.
That's come in for a bit of criticism recently. Just kind of keen to get your take on, you know, whether that's fair or unfair criticism from your perspective.
No, for my opinion on it is, you know, of course, now sort of the competitors, Sky and Box Nation, they don't have the most sterling of commentary. Let's put it that way. You know, it's not necessarily fantastic to listen to. So you'd rather turn the sound off or have, you know, someone else commentating over it. But, you know, Barry Jones did have a very dodgy night. I mean, he was giving Huck a lot of credit for, you know, kind of pot shots that were landing or shots that were landing on the gloves and arms and that sort of stuff. And for me, everything Huck did, Brieids done, you know, Brieids countered and he answered just as well, if not better. So I don't know where Barry Jones was. You know, I don't know what he was watching. If he was watching a different fight, I haven't got a clue. But you know, it was a very dodgy night. I don't know if you guys caught it. You know, on the, you know, when they went back to the studio, they actually spelled Brieids' name wrong.
I saw that.
So yeah, I mean, in regards to what they're going to do with the BT Sport deal, you know, they're going to have to buck up their ideas very, very quickly, because it's very, you know, some of the sort of production is very dubious. Like, you know, it's not great to sort of see a major competitor, a major competitor, potential competitor, compete with Sky, and, you know, have these sort of, you know, basic errors. I think they're schoolboy errors. You know, spelling a guy's name wrong. You know, that's a simple Google search. I mean, to get it right. So, yeah, they really need to sort it out quickly, because, you know, Steve Bunce as well as a presenter is. I don't want to comment any further than what you guys have commented on Buncey, because you know, he's a likable sort of character. He's a funny character, but is that a guy to lead a show like a major bill? I can't see it. You know, not that someone like a Johnny Nelson or someone is any better, but you know, it does look a bit weird having him as the head sort of presenter, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, final question, then we'll let Irish Tom out of his cage. Did you happen to see Akinlade Gorman?
I didn't watch the whole fight. I watched the highlights, but yeah, I mean, Gorman looks really good. I've seen bits and pieces of him before, and he looks like a decent sort of operator for at the level he's fighting at. I know he's 20 years old, if I'm correct, and he's very young, so he's got time to come into his own. You know, he's coming into his own man strength and that sort of stuff. And he done a decent number on Akinlade. So yeah, I mean, good fighter. He'll grow, he'll develop, but whether or not he'll get the opportunities at this moment in time, or maybe if he needs more fights, then that's the main thing, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I agree. Very impressed by Gorman's progress to date. I won't labour the point too much, because there's already a post-fight video up on the channel if you guys want to hear more. But yeah, he's someone that I'm certainly following. Good stuff. Okay, we're up to about 110 people watching live. So shout out to everyone who's joined. If you are watching live, do us a favour and take the time to hit the thumbs up button. Massively appreciate that. Let me go over and bring in my main man, Irish Tom. Irish, how are you getting on? And you're on mute, mate.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, how's things, Iris?
Not too bad, not too bad.
Good stuff, good stuff. So I think the starting place, mate, is Huck versus Glowacki. What did you make of the fight?
Huck versus Glowacki.
Sorry.
We're going to that.
Huck versus Brieids.
Gossip had a Sherry moment.
Yes, I did.
He did. Are you there? No, I did. Yeah, I watched it over a series of nights there. I didn't see it live. Brieids did kind of what I expected to. I thought he outboxed him quite easy. Huck looks like he's a bit past it, unable to pull the trigger. Brieids landed a number of fairly heavy shots on him, so Huck displayed his chin. Like some people were slagging off this fight, I didn't think it was that bad. It was just a one-sided fight, you know, and the best man won.
Definitely. Do you think Brieids has the potential to be one of the top cruiserweights? I mean, how would you see him doing in a matchup with Usyk, for example?
Yeah, like I think he's number two. I think he's kind of clear number two. The cruiserweight's a weird division because it's quite competitive, but I don't think it's that good. Like I don't think in the last 10 years has there been a cruiserweight who's been in the pound for pound top 10?
Probably not, mate. No.
You know, it's one of those weird divisions where for the last while it's been competitive but not very, very good, if you know what I mean. Good fights, but not very high quality. So, but Usyk seems to be quite a high quality guy. I've only really seen, I think, 2 fights. I must say, I'm not a great fan of his style, so I'm slightly biased against him. But I think that he is the number one. And what's good is that he says he's going to try and clear up and unify that division before he heads up. And I think he's probably, and as well with this division is not a big money division, so those unification fights can get done. And it's really good to see the first undisputed since probably Evander Holyfield, I think, is it?
It must be, yeah, because David Haye, he unified some of the titles, but he certainly wasn't undisputed.
No, he didn't have. I think Cunningham had the WBC at the time.
That's
IBF.
Right.
Was it IBF?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So so it was fine. It was grand, a decent fight. Nothing special.
Okay. Did you watch Akinlade versus Gorman?
I did not. No, I did not. I didn't see it.
Have you seen anything of Nathan Gorman yet coming up, or has he not been one to just yet?
No, I have. I've seen some of his lower, because I've seen probably some of his earlier fights on YouTube. They're really small haul, but I think he's a prospect. I was surprised, when Ricky Hatton was. I saw him interviewed on IFL TV with Ricky Hatton or something, and they introduced him and I just thought this guy looks, he just looks kind of fat, I was thinking God, Ricky is scraping the barrel here, he must be, since he lost his Sky deal, I was saying he must have known. And I looked at a few of the fights on YouTube, I was like, God, I was quite impressed. Big, strong looking heavyweight that throws body shots.
Yeah,
and not just,
he's light on his feet as well, isn't he?
Yeah, so there's a bit of Tyson about him, kind of fast and light on his feet, and if he can bring that the body attack up to a high level, he'll be an unusual heavyweight because there's not very many heavyweights to do body attack.
No, absolutely. And I guess as you're, as he's only 20 years old, there's plenty of scope for improvement, definitely. So yeah, there we go. He's actually a distant relative of Tyson Fury as well. So there's some sort of, I don't think they're like first cousins or anything like that, but they're distantly part of the same family. So clearly from good stock. Let's put it that way, from a fighting perspective.
The Furies must be the most Randy family out there, because Andy Lee is a world champion. He's their cousin as well.
Yeah.
You got Burton, Hosea Burton, Isaac Lowe,
yeah,
Gorman. Huey and Tyson and all the other ones. That, I tell you, they must have pumped a lot of ladies around the northeast of England.
And I understand Tommy Fury is tearing it up in the amateurs right now as well. Yeah, dynasty, definitely. Tom, what do you make of this criticism about the Box Nation production? Fair or a bit harsh?
Yeah, like I'd say it'll improve a lot when they go to BT. You know, they've been releasing like little promo videos. I don't know if anybody's seen them for like Terry Flanagan and Liam Williams, and they're really good quality. They're like the type of thing Sky does. You can see they're getting money from BT to do them. Like, so I think just at the production level, it'll go way up. You know, I was watching some rugby at the weekend, the European Cup rugby, and like at the ads at half time and afterwards, they were you know advertising heavily on BT for the Williams and the Flanagan fights. So you know, I think they're going to get this big push. You know, people slag Bunsey. I like Bunsey. I think he's got a bit of crack about him. You know, compare him to like, you know, Johnny. I'd have him over Johnny Nelson.
Do you think
as good as
he's a guy who can run present a major bill on BT Sports though? Do you think he's the kind of guy to take it to that level, or is he more of a your call kind of guy?
I suppose it depends what you like. You know what I mean? You know, I think he's definitely better at doing. He's definitely good at a magazine show. Yeah. You know, he's vastly better at a magazine show than the Sky ones. I think they're quite wooden. Like Adam Smith is like, you know, he is so wooden. Barry Jones. Well, the other thing is they do get like people like Colin Hart and some of these old dudes, you know, and they are really. Some of them are really quite dull. Like Colin Hart would give you a stroke watching him. But it's like, you know, they could have some better people. You know, I'm not really a fan of these boxing journals, to be honest with you. I much prefer to see them interviewing boxing people. You know, like getting, you know, charismatic trainers or fighters or ex-fighters on there. Because boxing journals, most journalists in boxing don't have a fucking clue, as far as I can see. Gareth A. Davies and these, listen to them. So, you know, I think that they could change up that there. You know, I think there'll be pressure on Frank to make it less of Frank's mates that are employed there doing the stuff. So, and the money going into it will definitely make a difference. You know, the Barry Jones commentary, I don't know what you're talking. I don't know what you're really talking about with the, not in a bad way. I mean, like I heard the Barry Jones commentary quite different. Like at the end, like because I was watching it watching on YouTube there last night. Like at the end, he said he thought it was like a whitewash for Brieids. Cards came out, so maybe
I didn't actually hear him say that, but what? So you got the impression he scored it 12-0, did he?
Yeah, something like that, you know. But I think he might have been like in a commentary saying, you know, that's a better round there for him or that. But you know, at the end, before the rounds were read out, he says he thinks this is like, you know, close to. So, you know, I don't know. I'm not a crazy fan of Barry Jones, to be honest with you, but there aren't that many good boxing commentators. You'll see when Barry Jones, you know, when this war starts coming on, there's big pressure on these guys to talk their book, you know, and, you know, say, for example, Tony Bellew was good at commentating the other night. You know, Carl Froch is probably a decent commentator if he wasn't such a company man. Like, they really turn into company men. And like, that's, you know, as a boxing fan, it's really annoying. Like, it's not so much, like, you know, if you're watching, say, England play, you know, I don't know, take Holland or someone in the football. Like, you're going to have a biased English commentator. And it's like if Ireland are playing England, I mean, you know, you're going to have a bias to the home commentators. And that's, I don't mind that. But like, you know, if you're, say, an English fighter is fighting an American fighter, you're going to have a bit of a bias. That's really kind of understandable. You're cheering your own. But like, when it comes about to do with like your fighter and like against a different fighter from England, and you're watching it as a boxing fan, kind of grates. It's kind of bullshit. You know, it's a really fake bias that the fella who's watching doesn't give a shit. Who gives a shit if like a Matchroom fighter or a Box Nation fighter is going to get the rub of the green? You know, I certainly don't follow promoters fighters. I follow fighters. So
Yeah.
I think they're all prone to that. And I think as Box Nation deal takes off, we'll probably see more biased commentary. Most of the time on Box Nation, a lot of their cards are not their own cards, so they don't have that bias. So that's why we think they're good. But when we see until it's a big, home bill, I can imagine we'll see some fairly biased commentating when Tank Davis takes on Ryan Walsh or Liam Walsh.
Well,
yeah. So but I'm not a great fan. There's not very many good commentators.
The thing is, though, as well, I think just because somebody was a boxer doesn't necessarily mean they can accurately analyze a fight either. It's the same as footballers that become football managers. They don't always do well because I don't think Carl Froch is a good commentator, full stop. I think sometimes he gets it wrong, even when it's kind of he's getting it wrong in a way that is not even favourable to Matchroom. I think he just gets it wrong. I think he just can't analyse a fight properly. I think with him, I think some fighters just fight on instinct rather than actually know much about boxing. I think sometimes you might get in the ring and just be one of those fighters that fight purely on instinct and in all honesty can't really tell you why a guy is putting his foot on the outside of say if an orthodox fighter is fighting a southpaw, can't tell you why his foot's on the outside of his left and stuff. Do you know, stuff that somebody that understands boxing would know? I think that it doesn't necessarily follow that if you're a boxer, you understand boxing.
Just look at that.
I agree with you, Paul. The only thing I'd say there when it comes to someone like Carl Froch, I think more of his problem a lot of the time is his ego.
Might be right.
When he's trying to judge a card, say a card that's on in Germany, and we all know that German cards are as corrupt as Matchroom cards, right? So if he's trying to judge the card, Carl Froch doesn't want to judge it the way it should be judged. He wants to be seen to judge it the way the judges score it, And he actually explicitly says that I'm scoring this as I think the judges will judge it, which kind of makes no sense. It's like he doesn't want to be. He wants to be right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that his ego does get in the way. But I think sometimes he does display the ability to explain things. But that's a difficult skill. Most fighters won't be able to do it. Most people who speak English couldn't teach someone English.
Yeah.
It's you have to have a certain kind of didactic nature. But Darren Barker is not one of those. I can make that plain. Darren Barker is the worst I've ever heard.
Barker, yeah, he's universally unpopular, I think. But yeah, if the Box Nation people are watching and they want a new presenter or they want a new commentator, I'm affordable, I'm available, and I'm on Twitter at Boxing Gossip. So hit me up. Perfect. We'll move on from last week's action and we'll go to the news in boxing. Paul, let's start with you. 2017's been a great year already. We've had Frampton Santa Cruz the rematch. We've had Badu Jack versus James DeGale. We've got Garcia Furman, Huey Parker, Brooks Spence, AJ Klitschko, and now we have Ward Kovalev 2, the rematch. Really, really good fight to have confirmed and really glad to see this one's happening, mate. What's your take on the rematch?
Yeah, I mean, I was just buzzing to hear that it had been made. I mean, I kind of said this after the fight: they had a rematch clause. I mean, I think Ward was just. I think a lot of it was Ward's mind games. He tries to play mind games and stuff. I kind of thought this would happen. I mean, he would have been in some quite deep shit if not, because he's the clause was there. I'm just glad it's going to happen. I kind of think it's going to probably be a better fight. I think Kovalev will probably go for it a little bit more. I think he probably took his foot off the gas at certain stages and thought he had the fight won when he didn't. I as most of you know, I thought he won the fight clearly anyway. But I mean, I also will agree that some of the rounds were close, and that part of it may have been him taking his foot off the gas and losing the fight rather than Ward taking it from him. I mean, there's part of me that thinks Ward might be better, and a cerebral fighter will sort of like figure a guy out and be better in the rematch in 9 times out of 10. I just think in this situation, and that's what I've heard a lot of people saying, is kind of like Ward's the cerebral fighter and he's just going to figure him out. But what a lot of people forget is that Kovalev's a clever fighter as well. I mean, Kovalev can make adjustments, and I think it probably will be a better fight. Just really glad. Aside from that, just really, really glad that it's been signed. People were saying as well, about time he signed, about time Ward signed and whatnot. I mean, it's like 7 months, isn't it? That's not bad for is it 6? When?
Yeah, they fought like November, December time, didn't they? So for a first fight in November, rematch in June, that isn't slow at all, is it?
But Twitter, I mean, a lot of Twitter. I mean, I don't know if it's just the idiots I've got following me on Twitter or whatever, but like I've been seeing a lot of sort of like, about time Ward and all this, and it's just kind of like, yeah. I mean, if it was a year and a half or something, then you could maybe say about time, but
Yeah.
I'm
afraid, in my opinion, and I only get. I know the channel that I run here is pretty small in comparison, but in my opinion, I'm afraid that this fight has actually taken on some pretty unpleasant undertones in the boxing hardcore. And Ward and Kovalev both have camps that are, so in favour of their man, and that there seems to be a lot of tension outside of boxing. Let's put it that way. The fight for me, the two camps, there seems to have taken on I'll go ahead and I'll say it, an almost racial undertone, and it's. I've actually found it quite unpleasant, some of the comments from the respective fans of both guys. And I don't think either side is innocent of that from a fan perspective purely.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I just I can't stand it when that happens, because it's got nothing to do with boxing, has it? It becomes about something else. And I agree. I mean, I think both sides are definitely guilty of it. I think there will be black fans that will just support black fighters to the nth degree, and there will be white fans who support white fighters to the nth degree, and are not objective in the way that they view these fights. And I also think some people get a little bit too emotional about this stuff as well. Like, it's not your brother, it's not your family member, it's not you. Like, these are sportsmen. Just like enjoy the sport. Like, people seem to take things very personally. It's kind of like, you don't know these guys, man. I don't really. In all honesty, I'm not emotionally invested in any fighter. I have my favourites who I like the way they fight, but if they lose, it's not a problem to the point where I need to sort of like make excuses for them or pretend that they weren't or anything like that. Do you know what I mean? Which is the way some people also seem to go. So yeah, I mean. I also don't like the way this fight did, the sort of undertones, as you mentioned. Like, yeah,
it's the aggression as well, because what I find bizarre is, as sensible boxing fans, we know that some of us scored this to Ward and some of us scored this to Kovalev. I personally scored it to Ward. There's a lot of people whose opinions I massively respect who scored it to Kovalev. I know it's a controversial fight which people see differently. Now, to me, what that tells me is this was a close fight. There's different schools of opinions. Obviously, the judges lean to Ward. A lot of fans lean to Kovalev. There's lots of different schools of opinion out there. But a lot of these fans give the perspective, oh, you're an absolute moron that you scored it to Ward. You know, you don't understand anything about boxing. You know, how you know, it's so obvious that this fight was a Ward fight or a Kovalev fight. And for me, I think we kind of need to accept that whatever your perspective, this was a very, very close fight. And that is obvious, not necessarily just from what happened in the ring, but also from the, you know, the huge swathes of people who hold each side here. Paul, in rematches, I've always thought that the edge in a rematch goes to the person who is the superior technical boxer. I've kind of had the philosophy that if you've shared the ring with someone for 12 rounds and you are the superior boxer, you're going to have a slight advantage having learnt from that experience and maybe adapted your game technically. Now, I know there may be some debate on this, but I think the consensus would be that whilst Kovalev is a very, very good boxer, Ward is probably the marginally superior technician, you know, amateur Olympic gold medalist, etc. Do you think that side of things gives Ward a potential slight advantage in a rematch?
I mean, it gives him a slight advantage, but I just think that whilst I agree, I think Ward probably is slightly technically better. I think that there isn't such a big gap between the two that it's going to make a huge difference. And I also think that there are things that Kovalev does much better. His power is also an equalising factor. He can drop Ward. I mean, if he drops Ward 2 or 3 times in that fight, in different rounds and whatnot, that, you know, you could have a situation where Ward is technically better, but loses because he gets dropped so many times. And that's the problem, is when you've got somebody that has a lot of power, it can kind of even something like that up, a technical sort of disparity between the two. I mean, at points, Kovalev was outboxing Ward at certain points, certainly in the earlier part of the fight. And I just think that if Kovalev had have sustained that, it would have been a clear Kovalev win. I agree with you that, you know, this idea that if you scored it one way or you scored it the other, you're an idiot because you can't score fights. You know, like, that was a close fight. I mean, I said it in the podcast directly afterwards. I thought Kovalev won the fight. I thought he won it quite clearly, but I do think that some of the rounds were close, and I'm not going to call it a robbery because that's not, in my mind, what a robbery is. But regarding the rematch, I mean, I will still favour Kovalev because I just think I just think he. I mean, I'm not a fan of Ward. I've got to be honest. I'm not a fan of Ward. I'm not a fan of his style. I think he's a boring fighter. I think he's a dirty fighter, and I just think Kovalev will rise to the occasion and will not take his foot off the gas the way he did the last time. That's kind of how I think it's going to go. But the only real winners are the fans. Say something cheesy like that to end my tirade.
No, good comments, Paul. Largely agreeing with what you're saying there, mate. Let's go over to Jet. Jet, good news for boxing, and give us your take on this rematch, mate.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good fight. I don't know what to make of it. It's a good fight. It's a pound for pound fight, but whether or not the decision will be good or good for boxing, that will be sort of another question. The first fight was very close. Obviously, those people, going back and forth on who won the fight. I personally had it a draw, but it's important to know that these two guys are the two best in their weight division. They're fighting for multiple belts, and it will be it'll actually be on pay-per-view. So hopefully they make some money for both their families and that sort of stuff. So it's a good advert for boxing. It's the two best in the division, and probably a strong case. The winner will probably be pound for pound number one, I guess.
I agree. The pay-per-view figures, by all accounts, weren't overly strong last time. I appreciate American pay-per-views are more expensive, but the numbers seem to be around the 160,000 mark, which I guess you could say is relatively small given the class of this fight. Perhaps that's because neither of them are necessarily personalities that have become celebrities outside of boxing. I guess the question, Jet, is do you think this fight is bigger second time round? And also, in addition to that, the point I made to Paul earlier about would a boxer like Andre Ward potentially have an advantage in a rematch? How important do you think that is ahead of this one?
Yeah, I mean, in regards to Ward and Kovalev, I think the sort of the fight itself is not any bigger than it was before. I think it's a big fight in terms of the actual boxing fan, the average fan or the hardcore fan. It's a huge fight, but you know, in terms of whether it's bigger, I think it's near enough the same. Whether or not the pay-per-view numbers will actually be better, I'm not exactly sure. Sorry, what was the other question? He's on mute. You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Sorry, mate. The other question was, do you think that Ward being perceived to be the superior technician and superior boxer, do you think he's got an advantage going into the rematch, given that he's had the time to set a ring with Kovalev for 12 rounds and, you know, will have learnt from that? Or do you think that's sometimes overstated in boxing rematches?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I mean, in terms of whether or not he'll have an advantage, I think it's touch and go on that one. You know, he's obviously been in the ring with Kovalev. He adapted throughout the first fight. Whether or not, you know, some people say Kovalev took his foot off the pedal after the knockdown. That's you know, that's obviously something that Kovalev and his team are going to have to address in the second fight. Whether or not, you know, he has the gas tank to go a full hard 12 rounds if he's going to have to put his foot on the pedal and really put his, you know, foot to the gas against Ward to get the decision. I don't think he'll be going for the decision. I personally think he's going to be going for the knockout. You know, Ward, he has that sort of, you know, unbeaten sort of air about him that no one can really beat him. So it's tough to say. I mean, it's very, very hard. I think it'll benefit Ward a lot that he you know, he's gone in with probably the best light heavyweight in probably his second or third fight at the weight class, and he's actually got a decision against him. Whether or not he felt he personally beat him, that's something obviously Andre Ward, Virgil Hunter, and his team would have to sort of obviously address privately. But you know, definitely he has an advantage. He can box on the inside, he can box on the outside, but I think he may have underestimated Kovalev's sort of outside boxing skills as well. And you know, his outside boxing skills were actually decent at times throughout the fight, and he made he made a lot of adjustments throughout the fight, Ward and Kovalev. So yeah.
Jet, when I'm with you, let me ask you about the other news. Well, there's several other bits of news, but let me ask you about one of them, which is Mikhail Kessler making a return to the ring. Do you think this is an ill-advised return? And what do you make of the potential suggestion there could be a third fight with Carl Froch? Do you think that was purely hype and, you know, Froch teasing, or do you think there's actually a chance that will actually happen again?
I don't think that's realistic. I think Kessler's obviously coming back for a world title. Sorry, his world title. So yeah, I mean, I don't see it as a realistic fight. Whether or not it happens, then you know, it's not something I'll be opposed to, but it would be, you know, it would be a bit weird to see them step into the ring. And you know, obviously Froch is supposedly happily retired, so yeah, I wouldn't be totally opposed to it, but I wouldn't like to, you know, it's not a definitive fight I would love to see. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, my instinct on that one is it's probably Froch just looking to keep himself relevant, and you know, that he genuinely is retired. But who knows? Who knows? I guess a fight like Kessler is the sort of fight that could spark interest. Let's bring Iris Tom back in. Iris, I presume you're happy about Ward Kovalev too. Is that a fight that you're looking forward to, or is it just a fight that you think needed to happen?
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. I think it could have happened a bit quicker. I think, like, you know, if you gave Andre Ward a winning lottery ticket, he'd somehow make it feel like something bad happened. You know, there's something really negative about him. I don't know what. Like, but I hope this fight gets hyped. Sergey Kovalev, he's a nasty motherfucker. He does proper shit talking. You know, he's a proper mouth. You know, the boy's Russian, but he sent out tweets. Did you see the tweet he sent to Andre Ward? He said, "Be ready." He said, "Be ready, motherfucker. I'll finish your boxing career." You know, you gotta love that shit. You know, he's a proper fucking badass. You know, this is the type of shit we like. So I like Kovalev. I think he's good. I think that first, I think he should turn it into a war. I think if he doesn't turn it into a war, I think Ward might just decision him. You know, if you take that knockdown out of that fight, I think probably most people will give that fight to Andre Ward. You know, that 1 point really made the difference. A lot of people had it 114, 113 to Ward. I think I did. You know, and I think an awful lot of people who gave it by 1 point to Ward. Certainly, I think, did all the judges give it by 1 point? You know, and that would have given it the other way. So, and you know, I don't think there's much of a case for giving it to Ward much wider than 1 point. So, yeah, looking really forward to it. This year has been a great year. You know, it's the best boxing year I can remember in ages. We're nearly getting all the top matchups on all the divisions, or at least some of them. And there's good matchups nearly every weekend. So, yeah, no, really excited. Well, like, I'm not excited buzz for it yet because it's a bit off, but yeah, I'm well up for it. Another top-class boxing fight this year.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well said, Tom. I think that a fantastic year. Another fight that could well be made for the year. I mean, it's certainly not a big fight on the scale of AJ Klitschko or Ward Kovalev, but it's a fight that I personally would have big interest in. Is Nathan Cleverly versus Badu Jack at light heavyweight. Both guys seem to want it, and it does seem to be a fight that is potentially gaining momentum, especially because the Brieids-Cleverly rematch doesn't appear to be happening. Iris, how would you see that fight going if it were to happen?
Well, you get that fight quite a big build-up, and then it was Nathan Cleverly versus. I was like, oh, for Christ's sake! No, I was like, that was like the least likely name. I was thinking a big hype fight. You know, you're bigging it up. Number 2 discussion today.
Fan. You know, I'm a big Cleverly fan.
I know that.
House after he beat Jürgen Bremer.
Yeah, no, I'm a fan of Nathan's as well. So, but you know, I think that's quite an easy win for Badu Jack. I would make him a heavy favourite. Just assuming he's able to stand up at the higher weight, which I think he will. Nathan Cleverly is a perfect fight for him. He's not a big hitting 175 guy. So, you know, Nathan, for a guy who's supposed to be bright, has a degree in mathematics and stuff, like, he certainly doesn't optimize his fighting style to his attributes. You know, I think he doesn't fight tactically smart. So, you know, you just got to give it to the technician. Badu Jack has been on a good run at super middle. He beat Groves. He was unlucky to get a draw against James DeGale. And a draw against Butte, who he clearly beat. You know, who else? Andy bet Anthony Terrell. That's a really good lineup. There's not many guys in the world boxing who's got 4 fights like that in a row. You know, 4 tough fights. And like, he won 2, won 2 and drew 2. Well, he really won 3. And was a bit unlucky not to probably get the decision on the third one, even though I gave it to James DeGale. But you know, you can see you know, a lot of people had it for him. So yeah, great fight. One thing I just like to say, like, I was watching like some of the build up to this week for the fight Williams against Liam Smith, which I am very hyped for. Getting back to kind of the Kovalev thing, is like, you know, I heard if I hear fighters or promoters or trainers saying, "Oh, it's great now. We haven't had any trash talk, and everybody's being very, respectful to each other." I think, like, what kind of fucking idiots are these people? Like, like that when you want to actually build your career, look at even the best fighters of all time, like Ali and these. One of the main reasons people actually think they're the best of all time is because they really hype these fights. And so I hate when fighters go off like that. Like Andre Ward is typical for a guy who could be a superstar and basically not done it out of just pure awkwardness or not willing to put himself on the line. Like, I think it's that's why people do slag O'Hara Davies. I think they've got it all wrong, because like O'Hara Davies doesn't strike me as the most naturally outgoing type of guy, but he's willing to put himself on the line there to make a name for himself and to get exciting fights. So I just thought I'd say that. Like, Kovalev is making the effort. If someone's going to sell that fight, it's going to be Kovalev, because Andre Ward couldn't sell a fight to save his fucking life. And but back to Nathan, I think Nathan is, I make him probably a 3 to 4 to 1 underdog in that fight.
If you're offering a bit of 4 to 1 Irish, Tom, I'm going to ask how much you're prepared to take.
I'm going to wait till see what the bookies do, but I think that it'll be 3 to 1, or you get 3 to 1 at maybe even 4 to 1. Like, to give Nathan more than 20%. I know you probably think he's like a favourite.
What is the price on the Cleverly knockout is what I want to know. That's what I want to know. But yeah, joking apart. No, Tom, I echo your sentiments on fighters and trash talk. I completely agree with what you've said there. And I heard O'Hara Davies said if he hadn't taken matters into his own hands with the trash, he believes he'd still be fighting at your call. And he may not be wrong there. And and the thing, it doesn't even have to be trash. It can just be like, look at someone who does it a different way, like say Boy Jones Jr. Yeah,
like a lot of people like Boy Jones Jr. because he's just like, he does his own thing. But whatever you got to do, you got to sell yourself, you got to promote yourself. And this thing of saying like, I just let my talking in the ring work. Like, there's very few fighters who their ring work can actually. For example, is a guy who's what he does in the ring can sell, because he's just like, he's got that style where he knocks people's spark out. If you are a dynamic, devastating puncher in the ring, you don't need to talk as much. But if you're just like a boxer, say like, who the hell would give a damn about Billy Joe Saunders if he didn't talk trash? Or even Tyson Fury. Who would give a damn about Tyson Fury? Because he hasn't got the world's, like, since he's turned into more of a boxer, he hasn't got the world's more exciting style. So like, I just think these guys, it's just as important to your boxing career to be prepared to make an idiot out of yourself or do whatever it takes as it is to learn how to like defend against a southpaw jab. It's just as important, because
it's true. I mean, like, Ward doesn't even outsell his own hometown. He's from Oakland, and his last few fights in Oakland, there's been like only 75% of the place like filled out, and this is like a guy that's like Tom just said, it could be a superstar. I mean, I couldn't agree more about the trash talk. And I mean, look at Dillian White. Look at a guy like Dillian White. His skills in the ring leave a lot to be desired. Let's be honest, yeah. And this is a guy that, I mean, look at the I know AJ was a big part of why that fight did as well as it did, but that was a British title fight. I mean, that
fight wouldn't have done well if it wasn't for Dillian White.
Exactly.
There's no way that could have been pay-per-view without Dillian.
Exactly.
Dillian is the man who made that pay-per-view. I know, like, I mean that in the sense that Joshua's got the style, but if he was fighting another guy with Dillian's ability, it wouldn't have been pay-per-view, because Dillian sold that fight.
And it would have been like, it would have, and even if it had been pay-per-view, it would have maybe done 200,000 rather than, was it 450,000 buys it did?
Absolutely, yeah.
For a British title fight, it would have done probably half that. And look at Dillian White. I mean, like, he's becoming a bit of a name. Do you know what I mean? And he's a C-level fighter for my money. He's like, there's so many holes in his game. You might as well be a teabag. I mean, this guy talks. That's a
good line.
he talks. That's what he can do. That's what he can do is talk. I know Irish don't like him, but I like him in the interviews. He's funny. Like when he was talking about Lucas Brown, he says he's what was it, like he's a semi-erect penis. He looks like
no, he is good. I just like slagging him for just making fake fights the whole time, you know.
Yeah.
Or I'm getting a bit tired of that. But no, generally, but he's exactly what you should be doing. And any of these guys that are coming up, they should be like, remember like Ali had his guy. What was the name of Ali's sidekick? He had like a poet guy, a black Jewish guy. Do you remember him in the film?
Bundine, was it?
Yeah, Bundine, and he used to come up with all his lines. Half the lines that people think, like Ali could come up with the line, don't get me wrong, but a lot of the ones that Ali is famous for, like float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, most of these lines are not Ali's, and all these rhymes that Ali would have, he'll take a dive, I'll knock him in 5, or any of these kind of things. I just made that one up, but I don't know if that is one. But these sell fights, and there's no greater salesman for a fight than Ali. Like Floyd, I don't like Floyd as a fighter, what he did for the game. I think that his resume, Floyd, I think, is a great fighter, but he has got no good fighters on his resume. He didn't fight any killers in their prime. He avoided every killer he could ever do. And but Floyd could sell a fight. And that's why he's a billionaire. Yeah, because he's a hardball businessman. And he sells. And all these people all these fighters that they're coming up, they really should be working on that. If they're doing 3 hours in the gym every day, they should be doing 1 hour on social media or whatever the hell it takes. Look at Dave Allen, taking up, going doing interviews with small, like, YouTube channels like Gossip and all these people. And, that actually builds your profile. And it's fucking free. It's free to do it.
Yeah. People need to have a bit more about them, like a bit more. I mean, let's be honest. This is not. It's not table tennis. It's not. It's not dominoes or cut. This is boxing. It's fighting. The idea that isn't it nice that there was no beef or
trash talk.
No, it's fucking bollocks, man. They're gonna get into the ring and try and take each other's head off. There should be some fucking like. That's not a nice prospect, is it? Like this guy wants to hurt me. This is the fight game, there should be trash talk.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm just deciding who wins comment of the night. Paul put in a very, very good one there. He's got more holes than a tea bag. He's got so many holes, he should be a tea bag. I'm also going to give a shout out to Amir Khan's chin in the chat, who put cleverly is going to destroy Badou Jack's elbow, which I thought was funny there. Paul, let me ask you about Luis Ortiz departing Eddie Hearn for Al Heyman. Do you think Luis Ortiz made the right decision? Do you think he was losing momentum with Hearn? Do you think Hearn failed Luis Ortiz? And what do you make of this comeback fight with Derek Rossi?
Awful. I think it's an awful fight. I mean, we said this last week, didn't we? Like about him going back to the US and going back with Al Heyman and stuff. Not back with Al Heyman, but signing with Al Heyman. I mean,
yeah.
Like the hope, I suppose, would have been that he would have started to get some decent fights. But I mean, it looks like the sort of like lack of momentum is going to continue. I mean, like, is Derek Rossi much better than Malik Scott? I mean, I would say that since the oh God, I always forget this guy's name, man.
Bryant Jennings,
yes. Since the Bryant Jennings fight, his level of opposition has gotten steadily worse. And for a guy of his age, I just think like his ship sailed. His ship's sailing on by while he's like watching it just disappear and get smaller and smaller into the distance. What, Derek Rossi? I mean, what? Why?
I mean, I guess what it is they already had the bill, didn't they? Sean Porter versus Andre Berto. And I guess they wanted to put in a fight at a very, very low volume. At very, very short notice. You know, and there probably weren't too many contenders available. But you'd have to say, you know, he's really lost momentum at best. And you'd have to hope he'd look very, very, very good against a guy like Derek Rossi, surely.
I mean, like, when you consider just like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, people were talking about Luis Ortiz like he might be the best heavyweight in the world right now. He might be. You know, I maybe wouldn't have said he was the best heavyweight in the world, but certainly wouldn't have sort of like laughed at anybody or you know, cussed anyone that said he was. Certainly after that Brian Jennings fight, he looked good in that Brian Jennings fight. That's the last time I've seen him look any good. And for my money, he's looked old in this last couple of fights. I just think it is. There's a saying, isn't there? This goose is cooked. That's what a friend of mine used to say. Your goose cooked. That's what they used to. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't think. I mean, if anything was going to happen for him, it's got to happen. It's got to happen this year, and I just don't see it. I don't see it. I think the risk versus reward isn't there with him for one, and I just think he's getting old, and I just think his time has come and gone. Really, the time for Luis Ortiz to get a big fight would have been after that Jennings win. And why he didn't get one, I'm not sure. But I don't see things going too well for him in the future. I just think it's over for him, really.
Yeah, it's you'd have to hope he looks devastating against Rossi, and then he's out in 8 weeks' time straight afterwards. Because they say Father Time is the only undefeated boxer in fighting, the only undefeated fighter in boxing, should I say? And Luis Ortiz could prove to be a victim of that, and it would be a shame.
I mean, he'd have devastating against Rossi, and then they would need to start trying to make the big fight for him. For me, yeah. if something is going to happen, when I say it's over for him, I mean I don't mean it's like his career's over, but I think it's close to being over. But what I mean is, I think his chances of getting a big fight, a world title fight, it is close to over. And like I say, I just think the risk versus reward for somebody like Wilder, who is notorious sort of like ducker of anybody with any chance of beating him whatsoever, and somebody like Joseph Parker, he's just not going to. I just don't see any of those guys unless he fell into a mandatory position,
Definitely. I think when the news was first announced he was going to Heyman, a lot of the American fans were kind of under the impression that we could see Wilder versus Ortiz, but I kind of agree with you, Paul. If you look at the way Wilder's career has been managed from start to finish, it would be very, very untypical of them to take a fight with Luis Ortiz when it wasn't required. I don't see that fight happening. Paul, Roman Gonzalez versus Rungvisai, that's a fight we discussed in some depth a fortnight ago or so. Understanding is the WBC have ordered a rematch of the fight. Do you think Gonzalez should go straight back into a fight like that, or do you think he'd be better served by maybe swerving that one and dropping down to perhaps a lighter weight class?
I mean, I thought he beat him the first time. To be completely honest, I thought he beat him. I thought he beat him quite clearly. I thought, I think in an ideal world, he is not really. What was it? A 115
Superfly.
115 Superfly. Yeah. I mean, he's a flyweight, isn't he? Let's be honest. He's not I mean, the size difference was evident in that fight. I still thought he won it. I thought there were times when he was just peppering that guy with shots. But he's a flyweight, so you can understand him wanting to avenge the loss. This is a guy that, you know, had been undefeated for 40-odd fights already. But I think in an ideal world, he would be back at Superfly and at flyweight. I don't think he's big enough for 115.
Yeah, so I mean, if you were managing his career, I guess you've got a difficult decision there, because you said yourself you felt he beat Rungvisai. So is it sensible to right that wrong and try and get the nod there? He'd certainly still be a favourite in that fight, I believe. Or do you think, you know, they should almost say that fight was closer than it needed to be because of the weight classes? Let's drop down in weight division. I mean, what do you think would be the best move?
Well, I mean, I think the best move would be to try and get a referee that's not going to allow all the headbutting and stuff. Because, I mean, even if you look very carefully, and somebody did a video on this, I think it was last week, even at that knockdown, there's a headbutt at almost the same point at which he hits him in the stomach. So, I mean, like, that would be the first thing. I mean, like, but you know, it's kind of like the weight difference was a big factor for me. He just looked stronger. He looked able to bully him a little bit physically. So, you know, it is a tough one. You know, I'm also not. I'm not one of these people that thinks that sort of like people's teams have this sort of like huge say over what the fighter does. I think, you know, like with Canelo when he gave up his bout and stuff, everybody blames Oscar, but you know, like you know, these guys are not going to be told what to do. You know, Canelo's a superstar. You know, he's calling them shots. Make no mistake, he's calling his own shots, and I believe the same is probably true of Roman Gonzalez. And so it's a lot of it's going to be down to what he wants himself, and what he's probably going to want himself is to avenge that loss, because I think he will believe, just like most people, in all honesty, most of the people I've seen doing videos or comment on that fight believe that Roman Gonzalez won it. So I think he will probably want to avenge the loss. So that's probably what will happen.
I hear you. Let's bring Jet in on that one. Jet, if you were working with Gonzalez, or if you were in charge of his direction, so to speak, would you go straight into that rematch, mate, or would you maybe look at mixing it up in terms of weight classes?
Yeah, he's at Superfly, isn't it? He looks small for Superfly for me, and in the Rungvisai fight, he did struggle with Rungvisai. You know, just with the sheer sort of size and you know, build of Rungvisai. He probably won the fight, but you know, he didn't do himself justice, I guess, for pound number one, I guess, for some people, what they were saying of him. So I mean, he could probably win the fight again, you know, or actually get the decision and win his belt back. But then he's got a tough rematch. WBC have actually ordered Quadras versus Estrada, so the winner of that will face the winner of Rungvisai versus Chocolatito. So that will be a hard fight as well. I know some of the sort of guys in the community, the boxing community, they think that Chocolatito actually lost to Estrada, and Estrada was weight drained at, I think it was 108 or one. I think it was 108. So yeah, I mean, it's tough to say with Gonzalez because he's obviously had a lot of hype. He had 40 something and 0, 46 and 0 or something like that, if I was correct. And obviously he's lost, so he's lost a bit of steam. But you know, he's got a rematch. He can try and win his belt backs, and yeah, I just don't think he should be at Superfly for the foreseeable future. I just don't think he's big enough. I simply think he's a bit too small. He's been talking about moving up to bantamweight, and that's suicidal. If you look at someone like Zlani Tete, Jamie McDonnell, they're going to tower over him. Like, they're going to be mammoth compared to him. So yeah, it's a bit dodgy, but it's a bit dodgy keeping him at Superfly. But obviously his promoters and his sort of team know best, I guess. And hopefully, he gets a win, and we get to see maybe a Strada rematch or Quadras rematch, I guess.
Sorry, Jet. Sorry.
Yes. Hello.
When you just said a lot of people thought he lost the fight with Estrada, did you mean Quadras?
No, Estrada. Some people, not a lot, but some people say he lost the fight with Estrada, or it was very, very close. I know it was a very close fight. I've gone back and watched it. I had Gonzalez winning, but that was a close fight. The Quadras fight was really close as well, actually.
Yeah, I thought
both very close fights.
I thought you might have meant the Quadras.
Yeah, no, both of them. I mean,
yeah,
Gonzalez.
I thought he beat Estrada quite handily. That was.
Yeah, I thought so too.
That was a good fight, but I wasn't aware of anybody saying that
there's a few. Yeah, there's a few people, and the sort of the forums, the hardcore, the ultra sort of let's go against the sort of the main guy, because the main guy in the light weight classes is Gonzalez. He's kind of moved through the weights and that sort of stuff, so he's kind of the first guy to hate on, I guess, for some of the fans. But obviously everyone's entitled to their own opinion. If they think it's a close fight, it's a close fight. And the Quadras fight was very, very close.
Oh, Juan Francisco Estrada's a killer as well. I mean,
he's a good fighter, very, very good fighter. So hopefully we get a rematch or even a Quadras rematch. It'll be good. Do I think he can win against those guys? Yeah, probably, but he might make hard work of it, especially at that higher weight class. I just think, especially against Quadras, who's a very big super fly, I think he will struggle at times in a fight again. Like, it's just a sort of height and weight dimension, and some of the rumors were that he was actually struggling to make superfly the superfly limit. So obviously he was talking about moving to bantamweight, which I think is very dubious if he moves up. But I guess we'll wait and see. At least his team has got him the rematch, so that's the main thing, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think his style is not a style that lends itself well to moving up in weight any more than he already has, because he's a guy that just keeps moving forward and he doesn't mind taking shots. And the problem is, you can do that at flyweight when you're
the naturally bigger guy,
but that's what we saw with the Quadras fight, certainly, was that he his face looked quite bad at the end. No, he won that fight, and I did think he just won that fight. But I mean, God, I hope he doesn't move up to bantamweight. He's going to get mullered at bantamweight.
I don't want to see the height and weight discrepancy at that.
I think Zlani Tete would just ice him. I think.
I wouldn't be surprised, mate.
Too big.
Yeah, I think it's suicide career suicide if he moves up to 118. It's just, Superfly, I think, is his ceiling at this moment in time. Just weight wise, the guys, they are naturally bigger, naturally stronger, and I think already he's shown signs of, it's a bit tough at this sort of new weight. At bantamweight, it's a whole new level, and I think just the guys will be much bigger, much stronger, can take more of his punches. Better punch resistance, and I think it'll be very tough for him to sell himself to move up to bantamweight and do relatively well.
Yeah, I agree, mate.
Yeah, I was also going to ask you about ticket sales for the Kell Brook fight. I understand it did something like 17,000 tickets within a few hours of going online. Now, the usual detractors around Eddie Hearn ticket sales that are complaining about the StubHub relationship again, and I don't particularly want to go over that because it's fairly old ground now, and we've kind of been there and done that on several occasions. But do you think this ticket sales, were you surprised by that? I wasn't 100% sure this would be a sellout because I wasn't totally clear that Kell Brook was a major ticket seller in his own right.
Yeah, oddly enough, I was actually talking about the same topic to my cousin, a very knowledgeable boxing fan, and he was saying the GGG fight has definitely risen. He's definitely risen Kell Brook's profile to a new level, and because we were trying to get tickets for that, and tickets sold out pretty quickly. So obviously, they've obviously sort of came over from the GGG sort of side and that GGG fight, and they've kind of come down towards the Kell Brook, Errol Spence. Whether or not the sort of hardcore, the casuals know Errol Spence over here in the UK, that's kind of a different story, because Golovkin has been talked about peripherally, but with Errol Spence, he hasn't really been obviously discussed in a huge amount of detail over here in the UK. But I'm not unsurprised. Let's put it that way. I'm not really shocked at the numbers. I did think it might have done slightly less, but 17,000 is quite a lot. Obviously, Bramall Lane, I'm not sure the capacity at Bramall Lane, but it must be a fair size. And for Kell to do that is, he's obviously, his profile has risen significantly to what it was before. Being on sort of the undercard or kind of just headlining the pay-per-view, but not really being the main attraction against Frankie Gavin and that sort of stuff. So his I guess the loss to Golovkin has obviously gained him some credit, especially with the way he fought. He fought with, he came out with a lot of credit for, respectable sort of loss, I guess. Obviously, he did get beat up towards the end slightly, but someone saying 32k capacity at Bramall Lane, so they've obviously done just over half, 17k they've just done, so that's pretty decent. But yeah, so he's obviously come out of the fight and he's done really well for himself, and obviously Eddie's done a good job marketing him. So yeah, it's a fantastic fight. That's the main thing, regardless of ticket sales or whatever. It's one of the best fights that we have in recent times, and probably one of the best fights in the welterweight division.
Totally agree. And just to clarify, I'm sure the capacity at Bramall Lane is 32,000. Sounds about right. But there were only 17,000 tickets on sale at that particular point. So I think there may be some more to be released or various packages, etc. But for now, it is sold out. So yeah, that's done better than I expected initially in the first instance. One final news topic to talk about before we move it on to to next week's boxing, and that's the Billy Joe Saunders situation. In the lead up to this podcast, I get a good few messages on Facebook and Twitter and emails with people saying, please remember to discuss this on the podcast. And I've got to say, this week, probably 90% of the messages have related to the Billy Joe Saunders situation. So I'm going to read you guys out 2 quotes from the official verified Twitter of Billy Joe Saunders. And this is 1 day ago. No fight confirmed. Don't ask me. Ask at Frank Warren. Will not be taking no more. And then he's got an emoji of what can only be described as a lump of crap. And then Billy Joe Saunders has put on another tweet saying he might have to start looking for a job in Tesco. So Billy Joe Saunders has, come out. He's expressed his discontent. We know he's been unhappy, with the lack of big fights. We know he's, not had the Eubank Jr. rematch, not had the Golovkin fight, and that Golovkin fight does seem to be drifting further and further away. So I guess the question remains: is Frank Warren doing a good enough job for him? Saunders is a big name, but he's been very inactive. He's, his profile has dropped massively, and he doesn't seem to be getting any closer than a big fight. And it's frustrating because a lot of us are Billy Joe Saunders fans, and he's a popular figure with the public. So really, guys, I'm going to throw it open. What are people's thoughts on this situation?
I mean, I think he has to take blame himself for his inactivity and stuff. I mean, we know he's not a Floyd Mayweather type, is he? That is just like super fit all the time, gym head. He's a guy that blows up between fights. He's got certainly an affinity for the pies. should we say? And I think he has to take some credit, some of the blame himself. I mean, he looked awful in this last fight, and so I also get the impression that he's quite awkward to deal with. Like, you know, like just from a lot of his comments and stuff. And I said this before remember when we talked about his interview in the I think he said it was his sister's pub or whatever, and he was kind of like, a lot of his body language was just all wrong. I just didn't think he really wanted to fight as much as he was saying he did. The gypsy mentality is kind of like to always say you want to fight everybody. Whether that necessarily means he actually wants to fight Gennady Golovkin, I'm not sure. I don't know. I can see this fight getting made still, but it does seem to be losing momentum. I hope it happens because, in all honesty, this is the best fight for Golovkin now that the Jacobs fight's done.
The rumours are that Golovkin is obviously looking to make that Canelo fight, and Canelo has said they won't sign to fight if Golovkin's got a date confirmed with Billy Joe Saunders. So that's the sort of rumours. I guess if that is the case, it's kind of hard for any promoter to get a major fight for Billy Joe Saunders, because you could argue that they're perhaps not out there. Obviously Golovkin and Alvarez, Canelo would be tied up. The Eubank route is tried and tested. It's very difficult, and it's hard to know what fights are out there that would be classed as major fights for Saunders in the first instance. Having said that, and I know people think that I'm a Eddie Hearn lover, but I just can't see Saunders' career having been this inactive and this frustrating if he'd been with Eddie Hearn. I mean, is that a fair comment, or has it just been bad luck?
I think it is a fair comment, but I think he has to take some of the blame himself as well. One thing I do want to say though, just on the Triple G Canelo situation, it kind of really pisses me off. This does, like Oscar De La Hoya saying, if he takes the Saunders fight, we won't sign. Like Canelo's got a fight with Chavez Jr. So, like, why can't Triple G have a fight as well? To me, that is just them being total divas, right? And wanting Triple G to be inactive, so to give Canelo a bit of an advantage. That's all that is. I mean, why should that make any difference to them whatsoever? If he has a fight in the interim period, why should it make any difference? I mean, look at Liam Smith's just had another fight in the fucking weeks leading up to the Liam Williams fight. Does that affect Liam Williams? No, of course it don't. So why would Triple G having a fight with Billy Joe Saunders affect Canelo?
Yeah, it's a good point, Paul. I guess what they would argue logically is the Canelo Chavez Jr. fight is it's in May, as I understand it, early May. Whereas, given the fact that Billy Joe Saunders Triple G hasn't been announced yet, even earliest that's going to be late June, but probably more likely July, August. So, if there was hope to get that fight on, Canelo Alvarez versus Triple G for later on in the year, that would be substantially delayed if Golovkin was to fight Billy Joe Saunders first. It is slightly devious, so I agree, but I think there is some rationale behind it. If they want to make the GGG Canelo fight for September, it probably doesn't make sense due to the risk of a cut or due to the risk of an injury. To do that to have the Billy Joe Saunders fight so close, I guess.
I mean, I just think Triple G is making a mistake by sort of like really hanging on for this Canelo fight to the detriment of his sort of like already stated goal of unifying the division, because I really don't think Canelo's going to take that fight. Yeah,
and I mean that's the other point at play here is if Triple G, doesn't take the Saunders fight because he puts all his eggs in the Canelo fight. I agree with you. I'm not 100% sure Canelo will take that fight. And, you've got to wonder if Triple G himself is going to be left in the lurch and, may not get another big fight in 2017. And then when he returns in 2018, maybe he will be, he'll definitely be another year older. Let's put it that way.
I mean, if the last fight is anything to go by, he certainly didn't look like the same fighter. If that is because he's getting old and it's affecting him in the ring, then you've got to think that these like next months, the rest of this year, next year is like all he's really got to try and get any kind of big fight and whatnot. I just think, Canelo kind of like really let everybody know the type of character he was when he gave up that belt, rather than fight Triple G as Mando. That really told me all I needed to know. Now, he's probably more likely to fight Triple G now because Triple G hasn't looked like the same sort of like devastating killer that he did at that stage. And so I suppose that makes it a little bit more likely that Canelo will take the fight, but I'm just still not sure he will, and it might be a mistake.
Totally agree. Jet, Tom, either of you guys want to get in on this Billy Joe Saunders situation?
Well, I think that Billy Joe should go to Eddie Hearn because we've all seen how Eddie Hearn managed or Luis Ortiz's career so well. People give Eddie Hearn praise for everything that goes well, and they never talk about the disasters he has. I think we should put it in a bit of context. He turned Ortiz from the killer of the heavyweight division into an also-ran. Some might be suspicious on the motives of such poor matchmaking. But, the other thing about Kell Brook's ticket sales, apparently a lot of those, when they release those figures of 17,000, a lot of them includes blocks of tickets that have been gone to fighters and also released to places like StubHub and stuff like this. So the actual amount of them that actually get sold is usually a fraction of that 17,000. So we'll see what it does. I think it'll probably do well. I think it'll probably sell 25,000, 30,000. But the StubHub thing is a scandal. There's going to be they're proposing limitless fines on StubHub and such sites for what's being done on them. That's proposals in Parliament in the UK at the moment. So there's obviously extremely dodgy stuff going on there. You just have to look to the financial markets and all the big banks and all the huge amounts of corruption that's going on there. And you can imagine there's something very similar. There's going to be massive kickbacks going on to certain people who are allowing large amounts of tickets going to StubHub, and probably bots or privileged customers going through and getting access to these and then reselling them, and people taking cuts on the back end everywhere. So that's just like, so likely to be happening. And who gets fleeced? The fans get fleeced, and then people are suckered into it because they think, this is going to be a sellout because look, everything's been bought, but actually, people are getting fucked over. So don't like that. But Billy Joe Saunders,
only Irish Tom, was asked a question about Frank Warren's management on Billy Joe Saunders.
Well, I didn't get to talk for half an hour. You did about 10 topics. You did about 10.
Eddie Hearn robbing the fans.
You did about 10 or 15 fucking topics, and I never got asked the questions. So I said, Jesus, I better put them all together now here. So the Billy Joe Saunders. Well, like Billy Joe turned into a bit of a fat cunt himself. I think he's got to take a lot of blame for that himself. And he had an injury. And the thing is, like, with Billy Joe in his current situation is that, he's trying to sell a fight as well himself. But, like, the thing is that, I think Canelo is a diva. I think Canelo and Oscar are trying to screw with GGG. I think they're doing underhand tactics. GGG should be able to fight whenever he wants in June. It's 3 months to September. Remember, Mayweather and Pacquiao sold their fight in 2 months. They did very little press. They released it, I think, 2 months beforehand. And you know, this fight is such a big fight. Most of it will sell itself. You know, a fighter can get injured in sparring. You know, they can get injured anytime when they're doing this kind of training. You know, so you know, I think it's a full on just screw over people trying to, you know, play the A side more, Canelo more than ever. I hate that kind of stuff. But Billy Joe, if Billy Joe, you know, he should just defend his title if the GGG fight doesn't happen, because you know GGG is still the favorite for Canelo. If he wins that fight, you know, he can still get his big money fight against GGG probably down the road. But you know, Billy Joe doesn't have too many people to blame other than himself. I think a lot of it. I think that Frank has probably been, you know, managed to keep him having his WBO belt. I don't understand any reason why these guys should balloon up 3-4 stone and weight between fights as a professional sportsman. You know, it's fucking ridiculous. So, you know, it probably hasn't helped Billy Joe that he's been on Box Nation. You know, just for you know, getting people to know who he is, and maybe he might have had a little bit more opportunity. But I think that, you know, most of it is down to Billy Joe. Look, Billy Joe could have fought Canelo probably if he wasn't so fat. Do you remember all that stuff about Canelo?
Yeah.
You know, and at that time when that was going on, and all this time when Canelo fought, or when GGG fought Kell Brook, he was there saying, "Oh, I'll fight you," and 3 months later he's struggling to make weight. It's like, you know, Billy Joe's got to fucking, you know, he's got to look at himself. You know, just because you injure your hand doesn't mean you have to put on 4 stone of weight. You know, so I think it's a lot of, yeah. But you know, Billy Joe, he's probably just trying to sell a fight and stuff like that. But you know, I think it's whatever.
I mean, some fighters can do it. Some fighters can balloon up and get back down. I remember Ricky Hatton used to balloon up and get back down.
Look what happened to him, though.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think Billy Joe's last performance shows you the effects of living like that. I think he looked awful, and I think it's largely down to the way he's living his life. And he's screwing himself over more than anything else.
Yeah, but like, you know, like we say Ricky Hatton, but Ricky Hatton ended up being retired at an early age, and his last couple of fights he was terrible in.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
So like Ricky could have been like, Ricky could have reigned a long time at 140 and done a lot of good stuff at 147. Went up to 47, fought Collazo, got a bit lucky in that decision. Floyd hammered him, and then Manny Pacquiao beat the brakes off him. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, and how much of Ricky was left outside in the pub or in the Jacks, fucking snorting cocaine and Domestos off a filthy floor.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear what you were saying, guys. Jet, did you have anything to add on that topic, mate?
Nothing more than what's already been said.
Did anyone? I only went to because there was a lot of topics to get through. I went to each. I only covered each news item with one person, really. So was there anyone who wanted to get in on any of the other topics at all? Speak now.
I'd say that I don't think Luis Ortiz has gone back that much. I think people are overestimating because you got a couple of a bit of bad matchmaking. He got matched with a guy with a very strong chin and another guy who ran for 10, 12 rounds. So I think there's poor matchmaking, to be honest. And I still think he's got a lot to offer. And if you put him in there at AJ, I wouldn't be surprised if he knocks him out. And the other thing I'd say is that Lawrence Okoli, like, he looks like he does have that killer power. And I believe that rumor coming out that he sparked AJ. And if you put somebody in like Ortiz, who's got very good power, in against someone like AJ, I think he's very live.
I don't think the rumor was that he sparked AJ, was it? It was that he dropped him. I mean, anyone could get dropped.
Well, he dropped him dropped him, and training was finished for the day because of it. Sparring was finished for the day because of the drop.
Well,
And, you know, that's the rumor as I heard it.
That's
whatever that means.
Yeah, that is the rumor. Yeah, they did say that training ended. Yeah, so who knows? Who knows?
Who knows? Lots of rumors about Anthony Joshua sparring. But yeah, there you go. Right, guys, still a major segment of this week's podcast to get onto, which is next week's boxing. We're going to start with the Frank Warren card in Manchester. Headlined by Flanagan versus Petrov, Liam Williams versus Liam Smith, which I guess is the real main event to some people. Daniel Dubois making his debut, Nicola Adams making her debut, Jack Catterall versus Martin Geffen, and a few other fights, Paul Butler as well. Jet, let's ask for you first on this one. Give us your thoughts on the bill, and is it one you're looking forward to?
Is that me?
Yeah. You're still Jet, right?
No, I've changed my name. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I mean, the Flanagan fight is very uninspiring. Very uninspiring. I mean, I've seen the bits and pieces of Petrov. Not really keen on the fight. I mean, you know, if you just compare Flanagan to Crawler, Crawler's probably half the fighter that Flanagan is. You know, technically, just obviously personality. You know, they're not both personable characters, but you look at, obviously, Crawler's had 2 big fights with Linares. He's had, you know, 2 decent fights with Barroso and who was Darlis Perez twice, so 3 fights even. So his last sort of 5 fights, they've been quite big. But, you know, Flanagan, obviously, Mazonke Fana, Orlando Cruz. I know he had a good result against Magdaleno, but he's just been very, very uninspiring. He's not a great talker either.
Let me tell you something on that, Jet.
Yeah.
My channel's obviously a small channel. I'm not suggesting it is a total barometer for how big a fighter's profile is. I'm not suggesting for 1 second, but you know, potentially you can get an indicator. My pre-fight video on Terry Flanagan versus Petrov received the least views of any video I've recorded in the last year on its first day of being released. And I think that doesn't surprise me, to be honest, because his profile is, I mean, really about as low as it can be for a world champion.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys saw it. Did you guys see the tweet that he sent out after the Linares Crawler fight? I don't know if you guys saw it.
No. Oh, when he was saying that his name was like mud in the sky.
Yeah. And I thought that was a bit sad from his end. He does, you know. I think he needs to look at his own promoter firstly, and I think he needs to look at himself. He needs to take a good hard long look in the mirror and say to himself, why am I not getting the big fights? Why am I not, you know, exposed to sort of the normal fans? Of course, he's on a smaller platform, but people know who Billy Joe Saunders is, or, you know, not necessarily casuals. Obviously, that's maybe because of the Eubank fight, but, you know, Terry Flanagan, he really has zero personality. I'll be honest. It's quite alarming how, you know, it's quite alarming how much of a personality he has, and he's a world champion. So I mean, I'm not sure what Frank wants to do with him, because he's obviously a good fighter, but he holds a WBO world title. But what has he really done in his career? His resume is paper thin. I mean, you know, very, very thin. I'd even say Kell Brook has a better resume, and Kell Brook's resume is absolutely awful.
Oh, Kell Brook's resume is miles better.
Like, and people slag Kell Brook. You know, that's just, as you said, it's an indicator as to Flanagan. No one has any interest in him, and it's a bit sad. It's a bit sad. Like, he's a good fighter, but, you know, you can't do anything.
I'll tell you, Quig, is he?
Probably worse. You know, those guys. I don't. You know, when you just lost for word, I don't know what to say.
I think this is a really questionable fight as well, because this is the toughest fight of Flanagan's career. And in a way, it's good that he's stepping it up, so I don't want to be overly critical, but it's the toughest fight in his career against possibly the least glamorous opponent they could have chosen if they'd spent a year looking.
Yeah, I don't know what Frank's thinking. You know, he's obviously put him on in sort of he's put him on, it's in Manchester, isn't it? If I'm correct, it's not in.
Yes.
Yeah, it's in Manchester. It's in his hometown. He's a defending world champion. It's a good chance to sort of get exposed to new fans. Obviously, Liam Williams. It's going to be on BT as well, and he's in with Petr Petrov, who's got a few losses on his record. He's an uninspiring opponent. He's not necessarily a bad opponent, but you don't want to put him in with someone who's a decent fighter, but no one knows of him. That's not going to give him any name recognition. Even Perez. People. I know Irish doesn't like Eddie Hearn and that sort of stuff. I don't think any of us like Eddie Hearn or Frank Warren or Mick Hennessy, etc. But we understand the job they do, and I think Eddie Hearn does a fantastic job of marketing the opponents. Crawler was. I think you said this in your sort of breakdown of the Terry Flanagan fight. I was probably one of the few people that watched it, but yeah, I mean, I don't know what to make of it. He made Perez look like a world-class fighter, even though he's not. And Frank hasn't done the same job for Terry, which is a bit of a shame. But I sincerely hope he gets a big fight. He needs to showcase his talents and grow a bit of a personality, I guess. And maybe then he'll get a big fight, I guess. There's Mikey Garcia, Robert Easter, Jorge Linares, possibly Lomachenko moving up. There's big fights out there for him. So, he just needs to call some people out. I know maybe that's not his style, and I appreciate that. But, Crawler's there. That's another fight. I know they're talking about the splits and whether it would be on Box Nation or Sky, but he's got to get a move on. He's not getting any younger. The time's ticking. So, him and his promoter, Frank, they got to have a long, hard look in the mirror, I guess.
Can I say something here? Like, I think that Terry is a really good fighter, but I think he's probably hard to match because he doesn't have a name. And also, he's a hard fight for a lot of guys who are in that top 10.
Do you think he beats Mikey Garcia, Tom?
No way. Mikey Garcia cleans. He has a chance against Linares, yeah. He's a chance. But he's, Mikey Garcia is head and shoulders above the rest, I think. He cleans out that division.
So do I, yeah.
But I think, for I can see Mikey taking him on because Mikey doesn't care who he fights because he'll beat them all. But say somebody like Linares, he's less likely to want, if he's got an option between Crawler, who's a basic fighter, and Terry, I think, who's a better fighter, he's going to go for a Crawler if the money's similar. The other thing I'd say as well is that, I think Crawler had a lot of luck in how he managed to get his name built up, in that he got hit over the head with a slab, and to be honest with you, that was the best move that ever happened to him in his career, because he gets in the back pages and they say Alex Ferguson sent a letter and all this wank, so it's like that actually turned out to be a great fillip for his career, because it gets him from some of the boxing magazines to the sports magazine, the back pages of the papers. The other things, and as well, like if we talk about how Eddie built up some of these guys, the fella that he bet, what did you call the guy who
Perez?
No, not the other guy, Mitchell. Barroso. Yeah, like it's not like Eddie Hearn built up Barroso. Barroso came over and I
mentioned Perez.
Kicked Mitchell's head in.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wasn't talking. I think it might have been gossip in the video. I just think that Crawler's had quite a good run, and Eddie is a very good salesman. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I always say it. He's a very good salesman. But I think that Terry doesn't have a good boat himself, and he's been on Box Nation this time. But also the thing is, he's only new. Like if you compare him to people who are on Sky, let's talk about, because they're not all. There's also other guys that fight there quite a bit. Like Jamie McDonald, one of Britain's best fighters. Nobody knows who he is. You know, Haskins. You know, there is people, you know, on Sky platform that have world titles that aren't being well promoted, or ones that should be better promoted. I think, like Luke Campbell, who haven't been well promoted. So, like, you know, some of them are doing well and some of them aren't doing well. But I think Terry is a difficult sell at the moment. Frank needs to spend some money and get some proper people over for him. I know that they were trying to get the what you call it one, the fellow that Mikey just bet, Zlatikanin. Yeah, and they were supposed to get him, but that never happened and stuff. So, like, I'm a fan of Terry. I want to see Terry do well, but you know, he doesn't do himself any favors.
No, Tom's right that there are fighters on both sides promoted poorly, but I think Flanagan, given the division he's operating in and the fact that he's the world champion with several defences, he would have to be the lowest in terms of profile, I would suggest. And
he's not the lowest, Tom. Like Lee Haskins.
Well, Lee
as in the division. Sorry, gossip. But yeah, in the division, certainly. I mean, Linares, after he beat Crawler, you know, he was calling out Lomachenko, Garcia. No one wants to. No one cares about Flanagan, no matter how good he is. That's the problem.
Not a world champion, is he?
Yeah, he is.
He is.
IBF bantamweight.
Oh,
title.
he is. Yeah.
But I'd certainly say someone like Jamie McDonald, who's on the Sky side, has a bigger profile than Flanagan. But my other point is
not much.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would.
Sorry, yeah.
I would say a bit more actually, given the amount of bills McDonald.
He probably does, yeah.
He was on, you know, Froch Groves, and but the other thing I'd say is, and I agree that Flanagan passes the eye test to a certain extent, but when I sat down and actually reviewed his box rec the other day before I did my video, and I knew his resume wasn't that great, but I was actually pretty surprised quite how bad it was. I mean, I'm not sure if he's beaten anyone who's even, and he's certainly not beaten someone who's top 10 in the division, but I'm not sure he's actually beaten anyone in the top 20, maybe not in the top 25. And if you look back at it, I mean, that Derry Matthews win, Derry Matthews took him the distance, and I'm not saying Derry Matthews made it competitive because Flanagan was clearly the better man, but Derry Matthews at least had some success in that fight. And if you look at how Derry Matthews has done since, it's you'd think that a world championship level fighter would be really getting him out of there, I guess you could say. And that Zepeda fight where he won the vacant title, that was a strange fight, obviously, with the guy injuring himself. I'm just not convinced. I think I'm just not convinced. But we'll see. Is everyone on the panel picking Flanagan to win?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about Liam Williams versus Liam Smith? Because I know it's not the main event, but I think most boxing fans would probably consider it to be the main event. So let's do a little whip round the panel and see who everyone's picking there. I don't know if you guys saw my pre-fight video, but I've gone for Liam Williams in that one. So Paul, what about yourself, mate?
Yeah, I mean, I think Liam Smith is probably going to be the favourite, is he?
Liam Smith is a very marginal
favourite, yeah, and he's definitely fought a higher level of opposition. I mean, I am picking Liam Williams, but I also wouldn't be surprised if Liam Smith just kind of like ground him down and maybe even stopped him. I don't know. It depends really whether Liam Williams's skill and the eye test translates up a little bit. That's really what it depends on for me. But yeah, I'm going for Liam Williams as well. I think he's a better fighter. I think he's a more rounded fighter. I think he's got more in the toolbox. But it just depends on whether it translates up. I think Liam Smith's probably going to be the best opponent he's faced. So I think it just depends on that. But yeah, I'll go for him. I will go for Liam Williams.
Yeah, no, I agree, Paul. And to be honest, as I said in my pre-fight video, I think if the same Liam Williams who fought Gary Corcoran turns up, Liam Smith will win. I think Liam Williams has to be very, very disciplined with the boxing, because Beefy's a very dangerous fighter if he's allowed to, put the pressure on and close down that distance. Iris, what about yourself, mate?
Well, let's just say I'm very surprised, Gossip, somebody of Irish descent like you calling Gary Corcoran Gary Corcoran. Where is this pronunciation? It's so bizarre. I don't know. Just completely mental.
Irish descent by blood rather than by life, I would say. Yeah.
But Gary, even English people call him Corcoran. I don't know where it's like. I think your man on Box Nation started calling him that. Barry Jones, and everybody just went crazy, and it's like some kind of weird meme. But Gary, I think Williams is. I'm picking Williams. He's actually favourite on odds checker. You can get him at evens, and Liam Smith at 11-10. So it makes Liam Williams very slight favourite, but practically split. I think it's a very good fight. I tell you, this is probably Frank's best card in about a year. It's a good card, and I think this is a great fight. I'm looking forward to this. I really am.
Definitely. What other sort of particular highlights are you looking forward to from the card, Tom?
Well, let me just find it here. I had it 1 second ago. Here.
Nerva. You've got the Bois debut. You've got Geffen versus Catterall. You've got Butler. You've got Nicola Adams' debut, which I know you're excited for, mate.
Yeah, and Zolani Teti.
Teti.
So
I was going to forget about that fight in a minute, actually, because I'm sure Jet knows the opponent.
Of course he does. He had a romantic fling with him in 2011.
I heard Jet
had a training camp in the Himalayas.
The amateurs, yeah. It should be a good night. I'm missing the bill on Saturday, unfortunately. I'm very disappointed to be missing it, but I will be very excited to watch it on Monday, I think, definitely.
What do you call it? I was listening to the Next Big podcast, and they had there was a Welsh guy on there. I forget his name. I think it might be Dewey or something. But he was given a breakdown of it, and I kind of totally agreed with kind of nearly everything he said. He just went through all the different attributes, and he just was saying how Liam Williams is nearly the superior fighter in all the different attributes. So I think that evens is a very good price on Liam Williams. I think he's. After this fight, people would probably. It probably should be. He should be one of those things where he's a 2-1 favorite. So I think that it's good value on if you can get evens on Liam Williams. I'd recommend that bet.
Good stuff. Jet, panel is united so far on Liam Williams versus Liam Smith. Are you gonna pick Beefy, or are you sticking with the rest of us?
No, I'm gonna go with Williams. I think he might just have sort of the technical edge, and I think he might be able to keep Beefy at bay. I think Beefy might come on strong in the later rounds at times, but I think Williams, has more than enough. I think he could keep him off, but that's not a 100% confident pick. I wouldn't be surprised if Smith causes the upset, but yeah, I'll pick Williams just about.
And tell us about this Tete fight, Jet. Is that a competitive fight?
I mean, I'm just going through the guy's box rec now. He used to campaign at Superfly, and he lost against McJoe Arroyo, who actually took the IBF belt after Zolani Tete had a meager purse of $80,000 or something like that. So he's not really fought anyone of note. He's rated 25 in the bantamweight division. He's quite small. I haven't really heard too much about him. I'll be honest, but if Tete is what we think he is, and I think we're all unanimous in saying he's a world-class operator, we'd expect Tete to do a really good job on Arthur Villanueva is his name.
Is it a final eliminator, Jack?
Yes, WBO final eliminator. I think Marlon Tapales is the champion at that weight. I'm gonna double check that.
Well, I haven't heard
So
but
yeah, I'm gonna check.
You'd be a favourite to beat him if they.
I'd pick him to beat. I'd pick him to beat him. Yeah, he's a good fighter, Tapales, though. He's very young, 25. But I'd expect Tete to do a number on him. He's actually defending his belt against a Japanese guy, Tapales, this month, even at the end of this month. So yeah, Tete on the march for a world title, could get a shot at Jamie McDonnell. I know Jamie McDonnell's in talks with Paul Butler for a world title fight. Lee Haskins is there. There's a couple of guys there. Yamanaka in Japan, if he's willing to travel. So yeah, it's just good to see him on our screens again. I guess Tete is a supremely talented fighter, so glad to see him back.
What about Geffen versus Catterall, Jet? I was at the Geffen Wayne Hibbard fight in person. It was a real good scrap. But is Catterall just too classy for him?
Yeah, Catterall's kind of gone off the boil, hasn't he? Though he, he's had a fair few fights. I think he's had a few injuries or something like that, and he's been inactive. So yeah, interesting to see how he gets on. I know Gethin's more of a lightweight rather than a super lightweight or light welterweight, whatever you want to call it. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on. But I'd expect Catterall, if he's up to anything, to get a win, whether it's points or stoppage. But Gethin is kind of towards the end of his career. I know he had that really bad eardrum injury against Tommy Coyle, was it? So kind of, I think the Wayne Hibbard fight kind of flattered to deceive a bit. I don't think he should be, I think he should have retired after the sort of Tommy Coyle one. He's had a fair few injuries as well, and he's had a decent career. I think he needs to hang it up. But yeah, best of luck to him. If he wins, he wins. But Catterall should get the nod in this fight.
Good stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing Daniel Dubois as well. A lot of talk about him. And
yeah, I've heard a few good stuff of him. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he's any good.
Yeah, slightly disappointingly, I believe he was initially scheduled to make his pro debut against David Howe, which would have been a good fight for a debut, really. I mean, we saw David Howe fighting David Allen only a month or so ago. But that fight hasn't been confirmed. I don't know why. I don't know if David Howe has perhaps pulled out with an injury or for some other reason. So Dubois is now going up against Marcus Kelly, who is 1-0, and his only fight against a guy who was 0-2. So Marcus Kelly, obviously a complete unknown, but he is a 5'10" heavyweight, which doesn't overly inspire confidence against a guy like Dubois. But we shall see. But yeah, excited to have a look at Dubois, Jet.
Yeah, I think if marketed properly, I think he could go places. I guess whether or not he's good enough for a British or a European or world Commonwealth. It depends. It's just we just have to wait and see how his career progresses. But if Frank can manage him properly and he can get him some airtime, it'd be perfect. Get him out in quick succession. I think that's the main thing, really. Keep him active, keep him hungry. And yeah, I'm definitely interested to see a big fresh heavyweight from the UK. Always interesting, especially with the current pool of heavyweights that we have. Whether or not they're English or British or European. AJ Fury possibly coming back. Allen I like, Lewison, White, Chisora. There's so many. So yeah, good stuff. I'm looking forward to it.
Good stuff. I'll move on to Lomachenko versus Sosa, but just before I do, Paul, Tom, either of you have any further comments to add on any of those undercard matchups or any of the debuts?
Nah.
Good stuff. Paul, let's talk Lomachenko versus Sosa. I thought Sosa was quite likable when he fought Liam Smith, actually. I thought he was a decent fighter, but...
You mean Stephen Smith gossip, sorry.
Stephen Smith, yeah. But Stephen Smith did have spells in that fight, and you'd have to assume that Lomachenko, with his skill set and with his capability, will have far too much class for Sosa. Do you think that's a Fair analysis.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good fight though. Sosa's not, Sosa's a live body in there, like that's for sure. I mean, he also fought Nicholas Walters at a point where Nicholas Walters was a bit more active and stuff. And while I did think Nicholas Walters was kind of robbed in that fight, it was the decision was a draw, and I thought Nicholas Walters won the fight, but Sosa gave a good account of himself as well, and it also shows that he's quite durable. Walters is a guy that carries a lot of one-punch knockout power, and he did catch Sosa with quite a few shots. So, I think it'll probably go the distance. I'm not sure Lomachenko has got the same sort of one-punch power that somebody like Walters has, or maybe a younger Danair. But skill set-wise, Lomachenko is probably the most talented fighter in world boxing right now. For my money, I just think there isn't anybody with as much in the toolbox. Like he's fast, his feet are amazing, his movement is incredible, his defense is very, very sort of like defensively responsible. Good combination for punching, very fast hands. He's just one of those fighters that his opponents, by the time they think about throwing a punch, he's not there anymore to hit. That's the problem with Lomachenko. Is kind of like his movement is so good that he totally frustrated Nicholas Walters. I know Nicholas Walters had a bit of a layoff and whatnot, but I mean, I don't think the result would have been much different if he hadn't have, to be completely honest. I think it's a very, very clear UD for Lomachenko, and I'm looking forward to Lomachenko stepping up, maybe moving up. I know I saw an interview. I can't remember who it was with. I've seen a couple of interviews with him lately, but where he was talking about all his challenges being when he moves up in weight, and he thinks he needs to move up in weight to challenge himself, which I think is probably true. I mean, I think Walters quitting on his stool probably proved that, and so I think he'll probably just deal with Sosa quite handily, and then we might have end of this year, but probably more likely next year, we might actually get to see something like Lomachenko, Mikey Garcia. I tend to think Mikey might be a little bit big for him.
I agree.
To be completely honest, he seems to think he wants to move up, though. I mean, I think his ambition may. This was the thing with the Salido fight as well, was kind of like, even though Salido was really, really dirty, really, really heavy, I think a big part of why that fight went the way it did was Lomachenko had never been the distance in a professional fight. He'd just come out of the amateurs, and that's the thing. If you have a lot of amateur fights and come into the professional ranks, you don't know how you're going to be able to cope with a 12-round fight. You don't know whether you're going to run out of gas. You haven't yet learned those little techniques of having maybe 30 seconds, a minute of the round off in order to save a bit of gas and whatnot, that a seasoned pro would know. Do you know what I mean? And so I think fights like that did him a lot of good. I think he's improved a lot since then. I just think he's an incredible talent, Lomachenko. He's probably my favourite fighter at the minute. I think he just has. I just think he has everything, but I just think he may be a bit small for guys like Mikey Garcia. That's the only problem. But as for the fight of the weekend, it should be a decent fight. Sosa comes to fight. I'm very much looking forward to it. I'm probably looking forward to that fight more than any other fight the weekend.
Could be a good one. I totally echo your sentiments. I think Lomachenko is probably not the biggest guy for the weight division he's at already. And I think against a guy like Mikey Garcia, who's knocking people out at 140, I think it might be a bridge too far. That's not necessarily because of Lomachenko's skill set. It's more just because boxing's a sport that has weight classes for a reason. To use the cliche. Tom, give us your take on the Lomachenko fight, and also Usyk versus Eric Hunter, perhaps.
Haven't seen Eric Hunter at all.
Michael Hunter.
Sorry, Michael Hunter. Yeah, haven't seen him at all. I don't think. And the other one, Lomachenko versus Souza. Souza is a very tough guy, but he's not a technical guy, and he'll do very well to win a round off Lomachenko. I reckon he is tough, so he mightn't get stopped. But I don't think I'll see him. I'd be surprised if he wins 2 rounds in that fight. I think you're being very harsh on Mikey Garcia, Paul, to say that the only reason that he wouldn't win would be if Lomachenko is because of size. I think Mikey is an elite guy.
Did I say that? I just said
something along that.
Well, I said I thought he'd be
something along that lines.
I said he'd be too big for him. I didn't say anything about any only reason.
Misheard us, but I think that
Paul was very disrespectful there.
Yeah. If I had a fish, I'd hit you with it.
But you stirring spoon away, Tom. You fucking...
Yeah, sorry.
But I mean, now you mention it. I think if they were the same size, I think Lomachenko's the better fighter. I think he's got more skills, for sure.
Well, I think that's to be seen. But I think people. I rate Mikey Garcia extremely highly. I think maybe I'm slightly on the. It's not maybe that popular position now, but. I do think he's very, 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 very good. And I think that Lomachenko is overrated. I don't know how a guy who's got 8 fights can be talked about like pound for pound top 3 in a lot of people's lists. Just baffles my mind. It's just completely mental. But with the loss as well.
It might be because in those fights he's won like 2 world titles and he's beaten guys that were absolute killers. I mean,
he hasn't beaten absolute killers. He's not beaten. He hasn't beaten one killer.
Walters was considered a killer. Let's not forget Walters knocked Donito Donaire out.
Walters beat Donaire, who was fighting up at featherweight, who subsequently went down to super bantamweight. So Donaire was never a killer at featherweight.
We can pick opponents apart all we like. We could say Dejan Zakhanin hadn't really ever beat anybody, which he hadn't.
He hadn't. He hadn't. But you're calling him a killer, and I'm saying he's not a killer. He's beaten no killers. I don't think Mikey Garcia has beaten any killer, and I don't think Lomachenko has beaten any killer. Yeah. So Gary Russell Jr. has beaten.
Fighter.
Gary Russell.
I think Nicholas Walters was sorry, mate. Yeah, I think Nicholas Walters was considered a really dangerous fighter, and I think the way he beat him said a lot about the type of fighter is. The other thing I'd like to say is when people are talking about Lomachenko in the pound for pound list, they're also basing it on what they see when they see a guy fight. If you know what you're watching. When you watch boxing, I'm not saying you don't, but I'm just saying. I'm just saying if you can watch a fighter and you actually know what you're watching, then you can also bring that into the equation. I agree. Resume, it is a big part of how you sort of like judge a fighter in the pound for pound stakes, but a super talented fighter when you watch him.
Yeah. I think he's definitely a super talented fighter, but I think he's fought no killer. The best guy he's fought was probably Gary Russell Jr., who has beaten nobody. Right? Gary Russell Jr. is one of those very slick, stylish fighters, but he's yet to beat any name. So who knows what Gary Russell Jr., how good he is, whether he's got the heart when when the pressure is on or any of that stuff. We don't know anything about, like, if Gary Russell Jr. goes and he beats Carl Frampton in Belfast or something like that, or puts in a really good performance against Frampton, you know, we'll elevate that win on Lomachenko's. But right now it's just a guy with fast hands who's beaten nobody. Like, and also he got beat up by, you know, whatever beat up's too harsh. You know, he got beaten by Salido, you know, and I can't just totally disregard that. I know you'll have other arguments for it, but he still displayed for me flaws that perhaps somebody like a better class fighter can hope to expose again in maybe a slightly different way or whatever. But I think you so much. I think he is a good fighter, but I just think the amount of talk about him, it's crazy, because basically HBO, a lot of the time HBO just get a fighter and they suddenly say he's the best fighter in the world, and then the Ring magazine gets in on it because Oscar De La Hoya does business with HBO, and the next thing, everybody's talking about people being pound for pound number one and this, that, and the other. And to me, you got to earn that shit. Like, it's just like compared.
I don't think he's pound for pound number one, and HBO and Ring magazine is not what I base. I don't watch HBO, and I'm very rare. I'm
not just saying it's you, Paul. I'm not saying it's you. I'm just saying in general.
What I am saying is, like, that loss versus Salido. I think it's ironic that I very recently, a few months ago, I can't remember who it was, heard you say that a fighter in his debut who didn't look too good. I can remember you saying the exact same thing I just said, sort of like, you know, he didn't know how he was going to be in a 12-rounder and whatnot. And yet you kind
of... That was a Howard Davis.
Yeah. It might have been a Howard Davis. Yeah, it probably was. Yeah. And yet, kind of like, you know, Lomachenko comes in his second fights a guy Salido who was like fucking 17 pounds heavier, who punches him in the balls for the whole fight, and it's kind of like, and nearly wins anyway. I mean,
the thing is, he wasn't 17 pounds overweight. We had that argument before. It was a lot less than that. But the thing is, like, that he showed to me flaws in there. That certain times you've got fighters who've got lots of slick skills that are really good, but when it comes to certain types of styles, they buckle under that pressure. And like,
it wasn't less than 17. It was 20 that I said it was before, and I was corrected. I was corrected down to 17. It was actually 17. But I don't think.
Gossip. I want an independent adjudicator.
I don't think losing.
I don't know what the weight difference was. I cannot remember it off the top of my head.
No, I'm joking. I'm just talking about, you better, myself and Paul are going all night. Somebody better cut in over us.
I think it's interesting, this, and for what it's worth, I may surprise people here, but I'm possibly more on your side of the argument, Iris, than I am Paul's. And again, this isn't necessarily disagreeing with Paul, but it's disagreeing with the sentiment that Lomachenko is a top pound for pound fighter. I genuinely don't believe he is at this stage, and I believe that a pound fighter would have got the better of Salido that night more comfortably. You know, I know Salido was heavy, I know Salido was dirty, but I just believe that a legit top pound for pound fighter would have found a way around that.
Well, I mean, can I just say, I don't think anybody that any of you could name as a top pound for pound fighter for anybody of the anywhere near the level of Orlando Salido in their second pro fight. Does anybody want to point to a guy like, I don't know, Terence Crawford? Who did he fight in his second pro fight?
No, I agree with you, Paul. You're spot on. But is that relevant in determining if he's a top pound for pound guy? I'm not sure it is.
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily think he is. I mean, I don't necessarily think he is number one pound for pound or anything like that at this stage. I don't think he's done enough. I agree with that.
Well, Paul, sorry, keep going. I'll interrupt later.
Wait, I got something to say. Crawford's second fight was Filiberto Nieto, 1-4.
There you go.
Right. There you go. I don't know who that is, and I'd be very surprised if any of you guys do. So that's, I think that is relevant in the context of assessing Lomachenko. I don't think he is at the top of the pound for pound list yet, based on he hasn't done enough yet. What I was saying was, when the people like guys like Roy Jones Jr., who has Lomachenko as number one pound for pound, what they are saying, I think, is not necessarily based on his resume. They're looking at what they see.
But here, Paul, I've got something to say to you now. Like, when you compare someone like Terence Crawford to, say, somebody like Lomachenko, it's just, for me, it's just not like for like. One is a double Olympic champion, okay? And he had 6 fights in the WSB. Yeah? Now, those WSB fights are over what? Is it 5 or 6 rounds? And they're of a higher standard than the first 10 fights of any pros. So it's not similar to saying a fella who's just turned over from amateur is just doing his starting fights. You know, you can't, they're not, because he's already had, it's the same with the Welsh guy, Andrew Selby. He had 10 or 12 or whatever, 15 WSP fights, I don't know how many he had. And then he goes in and he starts fighting at a high level early because they've already had that, you know, they've done their 4-rounders. So, yeah, in reality, if you want to make the case, it's an equivalent thing for him would have been maybe, it's probably more honest, not like you're lying, but it's probably more comparable to say that it was probably like his 8th fight in reality, because, you know, his WSB are a high level and they're done under semi-amateur, semi-pro rules. So, you know, I think we're not comparing like with like. I don't think he's a double Olympic champion. You know, he's a double Olympic champion.
Yeah.
You know, so like
it might.
He's not just like, say, some fella who was like, you know, a British fucking GPT member turning over and getting a second world, you know, in a second title, doing a world title fight. You know, it just doesn't. I don't think the comparison is
so maybe
the same.
So, okay, fair enough. So maybe comparing him to somebody like Andre Ward or Rigondeaux, who were also Olympic champions that did also.
They didn't do WSB though. That's the key thing. You know, they didn't do WSP.
So you're saying like 4 fights in WSB makes this huge difference as to whether you can compare them? I mean, like, come on, 4 fights. 6
fights, you know, but I think that I think it's not like, if you look at when you start off with pro career, you take 4-rounders for 6 or 8 4-rounders, you know, and he's already done that, and then he stepped up. So
even if you want to say then that it was his 7th fight, yeah,
8, it would have been his 8th.
Okay, so let's say it was his 8th fight, like,
yeah,
you've got guys that are in their 8th fight are not fighting anything like Orlando Salido or the equivalent either. So even if you want to discount everything else, it still was that stage of his career that most
definitely an early stage of his career.
Fighters are fighting.
Let me just jump in there quickly. So if we agree with Tom's if we agree with Tom's suggestion that this is the equivalent of like an 8th fight, and I think there's some reason behind that. There are actually some comparators at that stage. So, for example, Rigondeaux fought Donaire, who was 31-1 at the time in his 12th fight. I believe Usyk fought Glowacki, who was unbeaten and was the number 1 in the division, recognised in his 9th and 10th fight. Now, Orlando Salido, it's easy to forget, but Orlando Salido now actually has probably a bigger, more threatening name because of what happened in that Lomachenko fight to what he did before. But at the time, I remember that Salido was kind of viewed as an easier mark. If I'm not mistaken, he was 35 years old, which is old for a guy at that weight class. And I think he had something like, I'm just looking at him on Box right now, I think he had 12 losses, several stoppage losses, and a couple of draws on his resume. So Salido at the time was actually far less of an opponent than when Usyk took on Glowacki and when Rigondeaux took on Donaire. You know, this was a guy who was very much in the autumn of his career, being a 35-year-old featherweight who'd been beaten multiple times. Look, it was a big ask in his second pro fight to Lomachenko to take on Salido. I won't for 1 second suggest that it wasn't, but I think if we take Tom's argument that it was the equivalent of an 8th fight, I don't think it's actually that outlandish. I don't think that I would have still expected him to have beaten.
Well, I mean, I think if they had been the same weight and he hadn't have been allowed to get away with punching him in the balls all night, I think he probably would have done. But I mean, there you go. It's just my opinion.
No, absolutely, mate. Absolutely. And it's an interesting debate, definitely.
But I just think it's like Ricky Hatton against Costa Tzu. Costa Tzu punched him in the balls. Ricky Hatton just went and responded and punched him back in the balls. And that doesn't take much cop on to do. I don't understand why a fighter allows a guy to repeatedly do that to him. You should just fight fire with fire. I just think it's totally naive.
Well, it may be naive. I mean, I know he's a guy that really respects his father, and his father's probably told him not to do that. That a professional don't do that. And I suppose it depends which side of the fence you sit on. If you sit on the sort of Andre Ward side of the fence where it's just like anything goes, doesn't matter if it's against the rules, then fair enough. It's naive. I think
you don't instigate, but
I personally like the idea of being a decent sportsman and not fighting in a dirty way like that. I prefer that personally.
No, I agree with you, Paul, but you don't have to instigate it, but you got to stick up for yourself. I think he should have stuck up for himself, but
well, I think
that's pretty irrelevant. He won't do that again.
I just think the referee should have been jumping in and actually doing his job, because if you can just do what the hell you want, what's the ref there for? Really, I think that's the referee's responsibility to be looking at them things and saying, you can't punch him in the balls, man. Come on, I mean, You
should have tickled him in the balls.
There's 2 other Ukrainian amateur standouts on the undercard. There's Usyk versus Michael Hunter, and then also there's a guy whose name I'm about to butcher. Jet, help me out here. Is it
And the Vodzdik, is it?
Vodchik.
Yeah.
Vodzdik.
What do people think? Has anyone seen a lot of this Michael Hunter? Because I haven't seen too much of him, to be honest. I think he's an Olympian, but is he going to be easy work for Usyk? And Gvozdek is fighting Yuneski Gonzalez, who I remember from a war with John Pascal. So is that a competitive fight?
I think they're both competitive fights, but I think it will probably be relatively routine work for Usyk. I haven't really seen that much of Gvozdek, so I'm not sure how good he actually is. But I think Usyk will probably deal with Michael Hunter quite easily. Michael Hunter, I have seen fight. He is an Olympian. Although when I seen him fight, you wouldn't necessarily know he was an Olympian. He can get a bit wild with his punches. He's really there to be hit as well. And I think I don't think he's that tall either. And so I think it's just going to be Usyk peppering him, wearing from the outside, peppering him with the jab and I think Usyk will probably stop Hunter, to be honest. But Hunter's decent. He's not a journeyman or anything. He's a live guy.
Yeah, he's 12-0, isn't he?
Yeah.
The other person I'll give a quick shout out to, someone who I'm actually a pretty big fan of, although he's not fighting at a high level of opposition just yet. There's a guy on the undercard, super middleweight prospect called Jesse Hart, who I believe is a Mayweather fighter. I actually think I first saw him maybe on the Mayweather Pacquiao undercard. he's a really handy prospect, and I think he's turned 27 now, so he's undefeated and probably someone who's going to be stepping up in competition sooner rather than later. He's 21-0 with 17 KOs, and he looked like a real nice prospect to me. So recommend checking him out this weekend as well. Yeah, Jet, did you want to get back in on any of these undercard fights? Hunter or Gvozd or Jesse Hart?
Yeah, I mean, the Vodchik versus Gonzalez fight is a very good fight. The Usyk fight, he should get a routine win. And Jesse Hart, I haven't seen anything of, so I can't comment on that.
There's also your man, Kavaliauskas.
Yeah,
you know him?
Egidijus Kavaliauskas, yeah. He's
a killer.
He's Lithuanian or something. Yeah, he's good. Is he? Which undercard's he on?
The same one, Lomachenko undercard. He's 15-0 with 12 KOs, and he's got a big punching power.
Yeah, Egidijus Kavaliauskas. Yeah, he's good. Yeah, he's good prospect.
Good stuff. Right, that we've overrun massively tonight, gents, but I've enjoyed it. Let me go around the panel and see if anyone else has got anything to add, because that does conclude the topics we've got down. Paul, did you have anything else to throw into the mix, mate?
No, I'm good.
Iris?
Just that I'm getting very hyped for AJ versus Klitschko.
Oh, can't wait for that one. It's gonna be good. Jet?
No, nothing from my side, mate.
Good stuff. All right, cheers, guys. Well, I'll say it again. I'm away this weekend, so I'm going to miss all the boxing this weekend. I'm looking to catch up with it on Monday, and we'll do some reaction on Monday, and we'll, of course, discuss all the boxing from this weekend on next week's podcast, as well as looking ahead to all the other news and that sort of thing, and fights for the week following. So we're back here every Wednesday at 8:30. So do check us out. But yeah, it's been a long show tonight. We've covered a hell of a lot of ground, but it's been a good one. Thanks to everyone who's watched live and joined us in the chat. It's really good to see how many people have tuned in. Thanks to the panel for giving up their Wednesday evenings to chat boxing with me, to Jet, to Paul, to Tom, and look forward to doing it all again next week. So if you've enjoyed the show, guys, please do take the time to hit the thumbs up button, whether you're watching live now or you're watching later when it's gone up. It's got a boxing channel, Boxing Discussions, so you can also check that out, and please subscribe to that as well as subscribing to my channel. But yeah, that's it. I'll wrap it up there, and have a good evening, everyone.
All right.
Take care.
Cheers.